Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It is July 19th, 2022. This meeting of the Lake Oswego City Council is now in order. Ms. Linder, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Buck,
Here.
Councilors Mans,
Sorry, here.
Councilor Boop will be joining us shortly. Councilors Winland,
Here.
Wynn,
Here.
Councilor Burdick is excused this afternoon, and Councilor Raff.
Here. Now, everyone, would you please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Our first item on the agenda is public comment. If you are here to provide public comment and have not already done so, please fill out one of these white sheets on the back table and hand it to Ms. Linder. When it is your time to give comment, I will call you forward, or you will appear on Zoom, and you have 3 minutes for your comment. So just please pay attention to the timer, and that is all we have to say. So what we're going to do is we have 4 folks who signed up in advance to give public comment on Zoom. So we're going to start there, and then for those of you folks that are with us, we'll have you come up after. So first I have Diane Skurlock. Diane, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Good, thank you. So I'm Diane Skurlock, and my education includes a Master of Science from Harvard University School of Public Health, and my career includes working for federal OSHA, managing the health side of an Oregon OSHA office, and managing the environmental health and safety departments for North and South America for Hewlett-Packard. And so this education and career included the monitoring, evaluation, and control of noise exposures. So I have professional experience in this issue of noise. The George Rogers noise study validated that the pickleball activity is creating noise that is substantially above background levels of 50 to 55 dBA, and the installation of more acoustic fencing did virtually nothing to reduce the noise. The noise study also addressed the specific frequencies where humans are most sensitive to sound and stated, quote, the pickleball hit is about 15 decibels louder than the background noise, which is perceived as about 3 times as loud. In many studies where there is not an applicable specific decibel level regulation for activities like pickleball noise in a city like Lake Oswego, the thresholds such as the World Health Organization's guidelines for community noise or the National Institute of Health's recommendation for residential noise is commonly used. The monitoring performed for the George Rogers noise study showed these guidelines were definitely exceeded. I do wish that it would have been possible for you on the City Council to dive into some of these details, factoring into the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board's recommendation to immediately shut down the courts. I also think you would not have stated within your motion to further explore sound mitigation and the use of sound dampening equipment, since it is futile and a waste of money. If residences are closer than 150 to 200 feet away from the sound source, the reduction in noise due to distance cannot be adequately capitalized on, and no proper sound barriers and equipment can reduce it to the necessary level. You should be well aware by now of the harm that placing pickleball courts as close as 42 feet to residents' home has caused. The process document on court placement that you will be discussing today states at the bottom of that document, quote, it is anticipated that this process will be completed within 120 days from initiation, unquote. So it appears to me that this is somewhat of a vague statement, and that it could be years for new courts to be actually in place, and consequently the George Rogers Park courts finally shut down. There appears to be no urgency or incentive to determine and implement a solution, including short-term creative solutions. It is now time to shut down the courts to finally give peace to neighbors after they've been enduring the incessant noise for years. I, and most probably all of the 56 residents who signed the petition to immediately shut down the courts, are starting to somewhat run out of patience. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Skurlock. We appreciate you being here.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Next is Bruce Gilbo.
And that. Okay.
Mr. Gilbo?
Yes, I had a little bit of a
Hi.
technical thing to do. Good afternoon and welcome. Oh, let me get my face in it better for you. Good afternoon and thank you for the opportunity to speak again. This is my third testimony to the council. I appreciate your commitment and unanimous agreement at the July 5th meeting that the pickleball courts should not be at George Rogers Park. I'm disappointed that you decided to keep them open while the planning process proceeds, but I do understand the dilemma you face. I hope you do the right thing and solve this problem as fast as possible. There's real harm being done to residents in the Old Town neighborhood. You have heard and read the testimonies. It is sad to think this harm is being done for a game. It is not from the need to build something like a hospital. It's a game that can be played in many other locations around the metro area. I've lived in a lot of great places. I grew up on the south coast of Oregon, went to school in Eugene and Logan, Utah, lived in Huntington Beach, California, Salt Lake City, and Sisters, Oregon. But I chose to reside in Lake Oswego because it's a great city. I lived here for almost 34 years. I urge you to do the right thing and help rebuild the livability of Old Town. George Rogers Park was always a neighborhood type park, not a metro park. It doesn't need to keep growing until it destroys Old Town and harms its residents. Westland faced the same problem and was able to make the hard decision to remove a poorly placed pickleball court that hurt its citizens. I urge you to do the same and expedite the process to find a better location. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbo. And next we have Colleen Gilbo. Is she right on the screen there with you? Oh,
Yeah.
Hi. Hi
Yeah,
there.
we can't see the clock. Sorry. I don't
You
know.
don't yours
Okay.
are short.
No,
Okay.
we see you well though.
Okay. Thank you and good afternoon and thanks for the opportunity to speak to you today. I am Colleen Glabo and I live at 71 Ladd with him. 32 years with our family. We never thought we would stay there for all these years. We thought it was going to be our little starter home and move along. I am glad that you decided at the July 5th meeting that pickleball should not be at George Rogers Park. Thank you for your commitment. I would like to remind you of the harm being done to my family, friends, and neighbors. To be blunt, I'm standing up for Val, whose health has been compromised, for Paul, who passed away while suffering through the ridiculous plastic noise, for Phil and Yumiko, whose health and well-being are being compromised, and many other neighbors. I'm standing up for Wanda, whose health was impacted to the point that she sold her home and moved to Tigard. I'm standing up to all 59 residents who signed our petition. They're residents of Old Town. And I'm standing up for OTNA board that has the courage to unanimously vote to ask you to close the courts. I urge you to stand up for us, with us. Westland closed the pickleball courts, as you've heard, in a similar setting as ours. I hope that you have the conviction to do the right thing and close the courts at George Rogers Park as soon as possible. I think you do. I urge you to close the courts at George Rogers Park as soon as possible and stop hurting my family, friends, and neighbors. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Gilbo and Mr. Gilbo. Okay, next is Yumiko Sterling.
Hello.
Sterling, hi.
Hi again.
Hello again.
Thank you for your time. My name is Yumiko Starling. Today's agenda includes the relocation of the pickleball courts. It means the city sees the pickleball noise as a problem. The new location requires a 300 feet distance from the nearest residence. My property line is 42 feet away from the courts. According to your regulations, the courts should not be in George Rogers Park. Lake Oswego noise code prohibits disturbing noise at any time of day. Disturbing means causing feelings of worry, concern, or anxiety. The pickleball noise is not the regular park noise. It's a disturbing noise. I have a pressure in my head which I didn't have before. I can't enjoy my everyday life at my own home. I feel like I need to escape from my house to avoid this disturbing noise. I worry about my uncertain future. When will this disturbing noise go away from my life? How many more months or years are you asking me, my family, and my neighbors to wait patiently until you finish this relocation project? Every moment we wait, you are hurting our lives intentionally. Please close these courts immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sterling. Good to see you again. Okay, so now, and that's everyone we have on Zoom. And now, Diana Ross, it's a name I will not forget. Please come on down. Oh, thank you. Ms. Ross, please, when you folks come forward, just have a seat, introduce
sorry.
yourself, and then we'll,
That was harder than
please
it looked.
make yourself right at home.
Okay. So I'm here again. I want to thank you again for understanding that this is an important amenity for a real wide selection of Lake Oswegians. Just a couple anecdotal things. So after the July 5th meeting, the next day, I walked up and down Ladd Street, and I stood in front of, and it was the busiest time of the day, the morning. That is the busiest time of the day from 9 to 1. Yesterday, I was at the pickleball courts at 1:15. I was the only one there. There was nobody else there. There was an incessant noise. There was nobody else there. When I walked up and down the street, I got to the end, and it is where one of the neighbors lived who said we were, basically harming her life. You couldn't hear it. I was talking to somebody and I was, wait, you can't hear anything. You can't hear it. Now, nobody wants to be the monster who doesn't care about other people's feelings. We're not monsters. We're a responsible group who just wants to enjoy a responsible sport. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. John Gustafson, our former colleague, still our friend and neighbor. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Mayor Buck and councilors. As you know, I'm John Gustafson. I live on Ladd Street across from George Rogers Park. As you know from my email to you on July 6th, I'm very disappointed with your response to the nuisance caused by the noise of pickleball play. You became fully aware of the problem on March 1st of this year when our neighborhood association testified on the issue. At that meeting, you asked staff and the Parks Board to study the issue, to hold public hearings, and to make a recommendation. And they did that, and they invested quite a bit of time doing so. On July 5th, you seemingly ignored that recommendation. You did not discuss or deliberate its merits, and based on some of the questions that were asked, you did not fully read it, nor does it seem you studied the background material, which would have addressed many of the questions. So why did you ask for a recommendation if it seemed you had no intention of accepting it? Unless, of course, you were only interested in accepting a recommendation to keep the courts open. We develop public processes not for the sake of saying we have them, or for checking a box, or for buying time, but because they're important and because they inspire trust and confidence in our government and institutions. When we ask citizens to become involved in that process by volunteering for a board or commission, and then we disregard their work or that process, we undermine that trust and confidence and we discourage public participation. This is not a political issue or a balancing of two competing interests or a finding compromise. This is the City Council knowingly allowing the continuing infliction of harm on residents living near the park. That's what the Parks Board told you. That's what we've been telling you. Members of the City Council, I don't think you have a choice on this. You're in violation of your own code, and you're causing harm. We, the victims of that harm, cannot continue to suffer for another 6 months while you study where to play a game. We're not going away, and we will not and cannot continue to be indefinitely patient. It is time to do the right thing this evening and to direct staff to immediately close the courts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gustafson. Michael Dodson. Hi, Mr. Dodson. Hi.
Good afternoon, Mayor Buck and City Council. My name is Michael Dodson and I live on Ladd Street across from George Rogers Park. More specifically, my front door is 46 feet from the pickleball courts at the park. I can hear pickleball play from my front yard, my backyard, the kitchen, and even my bedroom. My family has a regular practice of playing music or news in our house to cover the sound of the pickleball courts. It has also caused us to be timely about when our doors and windows might be open. These efforts have had some limited effect. However, a new and somewhat troubling phenomenon has begun to occur in the last year or so. I've begun to hear pickleball even when it isn't there. I was out working in the yard and heard what I believe to be another game of pickleball resuming. It's a constant part of my outdoor experience at home, so I assumed this was the case. However, when I paused to consider it, the sound wasn't actually there. This experience occurs pretty frequently now, both indoors and out, and it leaves me with feelings of anxiety and then frustration. My confusion finds some relief when I realize my error, but when the sound of actual pickleball play begins, it's like a punch in the gut, like the realization of something I've been dreading ahead of time. Several groups and advisors directed by City Council have assessed the conditions of the pickleball courts at George Rogers Park, and all have recommended that play should stop and the courts be moved to an alternate location. So why hasn't this happened? In a recent article in the Lake Oswego Review, a City Council person remarked that this issue is a difficult balancing act, that while there are benefits in bringing people together and getting them moving, there are also mental health issues. The current choice of action appears to be for City Council to provide time for the Parks Department to search out possible alternative locations for the pickleball courts. This timeline is apparently at least 120 days. There is no estimate for the time it will take to prepare the new location for play. Such a plan seems insufficient, if not outright inappropriate. While this plan is carried out, there's a whole community that will be forced to endure the mental, emotional, and even physical burden of continued pickleball play at the park. How is this a balance? Members of your community are in crisis, and your current plan does a little to mitigate that burden. Essentially, you're saying, we will continue to hurt you, but we're going to do it for fewer hours each week. A couple days ago, a woman exited the pickleball courts and asked me if I liked the new, quieter balls. I didn't know what to say. Should I tell her that though I didn't notice a difference, her game was just one of a long string of games that had and would be played that day? Should I tell her that the effective sustained slapping of pickleballs created a building anxiety in me? Should I say that it doesn't really matter what I think because I feel powerless over the matter? That there are so many times when I don't even feel like I can enjoy my own home? And if I did, how might she respond? Would she realize the negative impact of pickleball on me and my neighbors? Would she see it as an opportunity to avoid play or seek out alternative places to play? Would she understand my perspective? However, I said nothing. I just put my head down and continued weeding my yard. I didn't say anything, but I'm saying it to you now. So what are you gonna do?
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Barbara Paris. Hi, Ms. Paris.
Hi there. I'm Barbara Paris, and I've lived in Old Town for 34 years. Several of us from the neighborhood met with Ivan regarding other park issues a few months before the permanent pickleball courts were installed. We asked him then if the temporary pickleball courts could be moved. Ivan's answer was a vehement no. He did not share with us that the tennis courts were going to be converted to permanent pickleball courts, even though there were plans and they
Ms.
were converted.
Paris, I'm sorry, would you just move that microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Okay, so The court, I know, even though there were plans and the courts were converted a few months later. My husband and I are angry with how these courts were put in our neighborhood. There was no traffic study, no outreach to the neighborhood, and our neighborhood guidelines, which the city has historically been adamant that anyone doing anything in the neighborhood observe, were totally ignored by the city. This is the kind of heavy-handed behavior that wastes our taxpayer dollars and our time, and is why a ballot measure regarding the parks was initiated and passed by the citizens of Lake Oswego. 2 neighbors on Wilbur Street, which is a street over from Ladd, have moved because they couldn't take the noise anymore. They both complained to me that they had to wear noise-canceling headphones if they wanted to be in their backyard. One of them confided to another neighbor that she had to seek psychological help and medication for the trauma. This is doing real harm to our neighbors. These are our homes, and we shouldn't be driven away over a game. I found a noise study regarding pickleball courts online that was commissioned by someone living in another state. The person who had the study done had suffered a stroke, which he believed was caused by the pickleball noise. The study was done by William Thornton of Thornton Acoustics and Vibrations. He said, the pickleball noise creates a human health risk as the link between certain types of noise, which includes the type of noise emitted by pickleball, and the risk of hypertension, heart disease, etc., is well established. He also mentioned that the only way to contain the noise was by a well-designed building. Barriers such as the one the city installed are not effective for reasons of fundamental physics. My house is far enough away from the noise that the noise wasn't bothering me until the barriers were installed. A couple of neighbors who live near the courts have mentioned that while working in their yards, they have been confronted by pickleball players who are upset that the neighbors want the courts moved. Not only do they have the trauma of the noise, but now they are being confronted by people at their own homes, which should be a place of refuge. These courts need to be closed now. If someone is attacked and they cry for help, you don't say you'll call the police in a week. The city is now on notice that they are party to intentionally inflicting harm on others. Conflict in cities regarding pickleball courts is a national issue. There have been lawsuits, and in most cases, the neighborhoods have prevailed. All of us really hope it won't come to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Paris. Elise Monroe. Hi, Ms. Monroe. Yes.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Elise Monroe, and I am a pickleball player. I was at the courts today at 1:15 playing with a group of 3 people that all were there. There was a group leaving, 4 people, and there were 2 people came as I was leaving, around 2 or so. That's an example. But I do want to say, just listening today, battling studies. We can bring up 10 studies that battle whatever they brought up too, but that's not what we're about. I think we're here to find some balance, some compromise. The gentleman spoke about people with quiet balls. As far as I know, and I'm very much looking forward to using whatever quiet ball the city approves. I have looked at my paddle. It's on the quiet list. And as soon as possible, I think we should start trying the balls to see if there's some mitigation. Maybe there's a study that says that won't work, but I'm sure willing to try it, as are many, many of the people that I play with. We're also looking forward to moving. We're not saying keep us there forever. Just don't kick us off in the only season we have. My personal thought, and I haven't really actually been there, is just swap us with Westlake. I don't know how far those courts are from residences, but it's a thought where it wouldn't really cost you any money. And I don't know, maybe I'm completely crazy and the houses are too close. I guess what I really want to say is I value very much that you are not just doing a knee-jerk reaction, and while I very much am sorry for any pain that people have been suffering for years, they can come and say that over and over to you, but finding a solution is what we want. That's what I was hoping you'd be here for, is to say, let's get this process moved up quicker and get them relocated, find them another place, And don't just totally discount the fact that we are trying to be out there to support health for multi-generational groups of people. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Monroe. Jan Sturdivant.
Whatever you say, I'll answer. Sorry.
Oh, ma'am. Welcome.
Thank you. So I was here, this is my second time here, and I think everybody on either side really wants a solution. I think that this community is well known for respecting everyone as an equal. And so what's hard is to look at the numbers and how do you weight the 70 Lake Oswego Old Town lot owners with 13,000 other Lake Oswegans? How do you come up with saying they're equal? And do you prioritize and weight one over the other? I'm very pleased that that you are evaluating this. I'm from New York. I've done a lot of board issues, school board, financial boards. I would be more than welcome to sit on a task force and help figure out and speed this along. In the meantime, I do see that we all sitting here have spent $70,000 on trying to mitigate this. We haven't yet even done a study after that to see if it's mitigated. We've also cut the playing time and have quiet hours to reduce our playing time by 40%. Is all we're left. So it was reduced 60%, leaving us with 40% playing time. I would think that that would show the council that we are trying to work together. We're just not closing and saying we're not going to compromise. We already have. Hurting others, nobody wants to be hurt. But we have people that are playing on those courts for their sanity, for their health reasons. And several of them spoke to you a week or two ago. So I would ask that you're in a tough spot. And I understand that. And I'm willing to come forward and help find a place. I don't know that the council ever said close George Rogers or replace George Rogers. We need somewhere to play in Lake Oswego. This town is renowned for community and caring for each other. And so I think we need to find something, and maybe the reduction of what the pickleball group has done will help ameliorate some of these extreme conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sturdivant. Dareth Lampka. Hi, Ms. Lampka.
Good afternoon. I'm Dareth Lampka. I'm a pickleball player. I'm an Old Town Neighborhood Board Association board member and a Parks Board member alternate. I've spent 40+ hours in meetings and reading reports about pickleball. So Jackie, I'm with you. We're all spending too much time on pickleball. So let's start with what we agree. So what I understand we agree upon, pickleball is a great sport, and we need more courts in LO. Second thing we agree upon, pickleball should not have been placed at George Rogers because the courts are too close to the homes, 42 feet versus the recommended 300. The other thing we're in agreement on, the neighbors in Old Town were not involved when this decision was made, and they should have been, and you recognize that, Daniel, of wanting to have a more collaborative process. We've also agreed the noise from pickleball is causing physical and mental harm to the neighbors, and that is really affecting all of us who live there. Other locations should be found in LO for pickleball courts. So we agree on a lot of things. The only thing that we don't seem to agree upon is when the courts are going to be moved and when they'll be closed for George Rogers. So Parks and Rec spent 4 months, and John, you are part of that, those meetings, sussing this out, figuring it out, talking about solutions. There were 2 motions made. One was to close the courts, and the rationale for that was that there is no LO numerical noise standard, and the pickleball noise was within the ODEQ industrial noise level, which was agreed was not an applicable standard. That motion did not pass. The second motion did pass. It was to close the courts immediately at George Rogers and to come up with a plan for what we needed to do it right in LO, which we all felt good about. What is frustrating as a volunteer is that what we all discussed was not discussed by you, and why the Parks Board actually recommended this, which was a lot of deliberation that went into that. So the pickleball courts were not approved at first meeting. The courts shouldn't have been placed at George Rogers. That was black and white. They were too close to the residents. There was an engineering firm hired. They came in and they told us that they did a sound study before and after the mitigation efforts, and they used a reference of an inapplicable DEQ standard for industrial situations, an industrial work environment of 100. The city of Portland has a threshold of 50 for their residential noise. We don't have one in LO. Because we don't have one, this is why we're in this dilemma. The measured park sound from the pickleball GRP
Are you
was,
able to bring it to a close?
yes, was 65 to 94. So I wrote this to you, so did 2 other board members. We would like you to close the courts right away.
Thank you. Lydia Lipman. Hi, Ms. Lipman. Welcome.
Who knew that pickleball could create such a problem? And I really appreciate you listening to everybody's issues. My name is Lydia Lipman. I am the Homeowners Association Chair of Stamford Road. I live at 252 Stamford Road, and I've lived there for 40 years, as have many other people down that road. In the early years, there were 11 homes, and we really knew how to negotiate our really strange road coming into Highway 43. But recently, in the years that Lake Oswego has bought some land there and established Tryon Cove Park, the problem of our road is getting to critical proportions. In the first instance, the days are getting hotter and hotter, and more people are finding their way down our road to get to the river and to use the dock for launching. And they're not small cars. These are big trucks, in many cases families and SUVs. They're coming with all their water sport paraphernalia, standing in the road, blowing up their little boats and so on and so forth. And at some stage, we've seen 18 to 20 cars parked there. Now, we don't mind people being there. It's a wonderful location. Unfortunately, the road does not support public access, and therein is the problem. For people who live there like us, just getting into Highway 43 is now becoming a nightmare. The road is becoming busier and busier. The cars have come through, coming from the south, and they've now been coming in at 25 miles an hour. The signs have changed to 35 miles an hour. They put down their accelerator and they zoom past us. That's the first problem, trying to get into the road or trying to cross over to Williger. And of course, coming from the south, I have often been stopped on 43 trying to make a right-hand turn, and there's 2 cars in front of me, one coming out of Stamford Road, another one in front of me trying to turn in, and we've tried to stop the traffic on 43. So basically, we are a tragedy waiting to happen at the top of that road. 2 Sundays ago, there was yet another traffic accident, and there was Officer Drew Boggs trying in vain to get us down that road and to give us access to our homes. And I worry about the liability for the city of Lake Oswego. This is your road. It's also ODOT's problem. And I don't believe that this road should be open for the public at all. I don't know what the alternatives are. I don't believe there was an adequate traffic study made. And I particularly worry about what happens when the lovely new development on B Avenue takes place. What is going to happen to 43? And how are we going to be safe for us moving into that road and for the many people who are coming down to try and enjoy the facilities down there? So what I'd like to suggest is that somehow we convene a meeting with the homeowners who know the street and its problems backwards and forwards. Lake Oswego needs to be involved, ODOT needs to be involved, and we'd love to know what studies have been done and what plans there are for the future and certainly for the present.
Thank you, Ms.
Appreciate you listening.
Thank you for coming and making us aware of that. Stanford. Okay. Thank you, everyone who came and gave comment. We appreciate it. Okay, next up we have the consent agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the
Move
consent agenda?
to adopt the consent agenda.
Right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes 5-0. We are now going to have a presentation on Arts Council update. I'll invite Ms. Nicole Nathan. Please come forward. We appreciate you joining us. Nicole Nathan is the Executive Director of the Arts Council of Lake Oswego. She's going to give us an update on what they've been doing. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. Councilors, Mayor Buck, and thank you. It's really great to join you today to update you on what's been happening with the Public Art Committee over this last year and what we have to do on our to-do list for 22-23. I'm Nicole Nathan, Executive Director with the Arts Council, and I have the pleasure of being here today with our ACLO board chairs, Carrie Halliday and Melissa Messner. Thank you for joining us. One of our newer PAC members, Nan Robertson, sends her regrets. She was going to be here as well. So, what is happening with us? The Public Art Committee, as you all know, is a committee of the Arts Council that's appointed to maintain and develop the city's public art collection and to provide oversight for the 1.5% art process. The Public Art Committee develops policies and goals for the selection, placement, and maintenance of works of art acquired through the 1.5% for art program. And the committee has approval authority within the artist selection process, evaluates and or causes to be evaluated by others, the public art collection, recommends uses for the Public Art Trust Fund, monies when available, considers projects by private developers and citizens that would result in a piece or pieces of public art, and responds to any other public art initiatives. The committee consists of 7 members. So just a few of our accomplishments this year include the selection of 12 new sculptures. These are the new pieces that will be coming to the streets next month, selected by our Gallery Without Walls selection subcommittee for this year's rotation, of which Melissa is chair. All of these are sponsored this year, so that is very exciting news. Next, another accomplishment that we're very proud of, the culmination of a 5-year process, the largest and most significant sculpture in the city, Flourish by Ed Carpenter, was installed in August of 2021 and dedicated in June of this year. Bringing together an internationally renowned artist with nearly every city department, outside contractors, fabricators, neighborhood associations, and groups was a great accomplishment and something PAC is extremely proud of. Here you see the artist, mayor, councilors, park staff, city manager, and ACLO board and staff at the ribbon cutting, which was then followed in June by a public celebration held at the Adult Community Center. Another one of our accomplishments is one of the 1.5% pieces for City Hall, which you see right outside the door here. The Land Remembers by Indigenous artist Lillian Pitt, who is Wasco and Warm Springs, and really a great addition to the building. The suspended Mobius-shaped piece is magical in form and luminosity with its infinite continuous design and glass accents. The piece is made of aluminum and powder-coated in a copper color. The design depicts the relationship of the land and its occupants of the Pacific Northwest going back over 8,000 years. The piece honors the past as well as the present, along with the future. You see iconic images that are laser cut through the piece and fused with art glass, and drawings depicted in a patina technique, as well as topographical map lines, which represent not only the indigenous tribes of the Pacific Northwest, but the map lines of Lake Oswego, and you see people of all colors, shapes, and sizes. Moving, deinstalling, and reinstalling sculptures and artwork inside and out. Pieces from the permanent collection were installed here in City Hall over the last year, as well as the library. Our 2021 through 23 Gallery Thought Walls collection was installed around town. Those images on the left are the pieces that came in last year. The PAC has completed condition reports on works to document how each piece is faring. So we do a documentation of all of our work in the collection each year, making sure that pieces are cataloged, documented, which also drives information that goes into our database, which gives us information that you can find on the Public Art Archive location app. We administered the People's Choice vote, and this year, Big Bright Brookie by Rick True was our winner. And we do all kinds of maintenance and conservation. So the Guardian that you see there at the city library, that has had some conservation done to it over the last couple months. Also, the Trillium at George Rogers Park has been shored up with the help of park staff. Our PAC committee has been busy over the last couple months, adding 3 new voting members and 2 alternates to the committee. Thanks very much to Councilors Mance and Nguyen for your help on the selection committee. Our new members are Shane Kucera, Lauren O'Neill, Nan Robertson, and 2 alternates, Manju Bhatia and Stephen Cohen. So for goals for this year, we have a number of things on our to-do list. Again, continue to do condition reports, cleaning of sculptures, inventory, research, maintenance and conservation, as well as repair and reinstallation of this sculpture that you see here, Moon over Lake Oswego, at its location on Cruise Way. It was taken out in August of last year due to some cracking in both of the pieces at the base as well as the disc. And in terms of safety and security for everyone was removed. A number of factors contributed to that damage, including not least of which was last year's heat, which didn't help. And we are now in the process of a repair process. A new disc is being manufactured. A new method of attachment has been formulated in concert between not only the artist, but our conservator of record, welders, and engineers from the Bay Area whose work includes installations for Burning Man. And we anticipate that this will be completed in the fall of this year and reinstalled. Another one of our goals taking place is we'll be continuing and concluding the 1.5% process for the Adult Community Center. We have a number of cool pieces which will be installed there. One of them on your left is a piece by Ben Mefford that will be placed outside in the patio area at the rear of the building between ACC and Tryon Creek in that outdoor garden bed area. Visible from both indoors and outside, the piece signifies not only community but interconnectedness and the passage of time. Ben is also a local artist who is out of Wilsonville. Interior works include the one on the top right. That is Firehole River by Anton Pavlenko, who is Ukrainian born. He will also do another commissioned piece, which will hang in concert with this piece on the downstairs floor near the restrooms. And then you also see that there will be pieces from the permanent collection, which will be reinstalled at ACC. These include not only favorites from patrons, but staff as well, who have picked these out and will be housed on one of the large walls on the main floor. These all are somewhat adjacent to restrooms. I'm not sure if that's by design. You know, everybody has to use the restroom. So, next, another one of our goals for this year is finishing up the 1.5% process for this building, which includes an outdoor mural, which will be right at the corner of the building here. We're working in partnership with the Portland Street Art Alliance, and we'll complete the mural artwork by artist Sarah Farahat. Our second listening session was held yesterday, and another one was held a week prior to that, both at ACC. The feedback from those sessions will be distilled by the artist. She'll come up with design concepts, and those will be presented to the selection committee in August. Her work will commence, and the mural will be installed by the end of September. Another couple projects coming up, as you well know, the Recreation and Aquatic Center, as well as Rasique Park. We are working with Parks on both those upcoming projects, as they both will trigger the 1.5% project. Going for Your Vision, which is the piece that used to be down at 43 and Terwilliger. You see that that's already slated and within the plans for the rec center. That's been a special request from Parks and really illustrates the active nature of that building. Also for this year, we will be updating the Public Art Master Plan, which was last updated in 2016. And this is a really exciting thing that's coming up this fall. So much has been accomplished through that 2016 through 2021 plan. You look at it and it's really interesting to see just how many things have been done over the last 5-6 years. And we're quite excited to work with Barbara Goldstein and her talented team at Art Builds Community to see where we go next. She has worked exclusively on the West Coast and with a lot of different towns of our size on public art master plans, just like this. The Arts Builds Community team has a rich, engaging, and iterative process, which involves a lot of listening, not only to artists, but art organizations, community groups, the business community, neighbors, and city leaders, and we're very excited to be working with them. So that's just a quick update. And we're really proud of our accomplishments. We look forward to all the work that will be taking place this year, and glad that you're with us on this journey.
Well, thank you, Ms. Nathan. Yeah, the great update, and thanks to you, your team, and the Public Art Committee, as well as the Arts Council Board, for all the work you do, bringing great art throughout the community. Clearly, you have been very busy. I wanted to ask about, now that things are finished along at Boone's Ferry, I know we have a couple pads out there just awaiting, great sculpture art, and I know that you were very involved in, setting things up, a lot of the functional art and whatnot that's beautifying Lake Grove. But are there any plans to cite some of our collection out there on the pads, and or do any kind of expanding the rotating exhibit?
I think both is probably a good answer to that. Yes, we are looking at reciting one of our People's Choice pieces, Emerald Jade Prayer Wheel, which you see currently at the corner of where BISO is, where Chuck's used to be. It's the tree piece that's kinetic, made by Rick True, who also won this year's People's Choice. We're looking to relocate that piece this year over at Boone's Ferry, and then as other pieces come up, either permanent or, again, expanding the temporary collection and the walking tour. Those are both options.
So we are looking at expanding the gallery without walls?
Yeah, that it could be located both there as well as downtown. Because we have pieces that are kind of somewhat dotted, and while they don't necessarily become a walking tour, right, it's still a temporary piece that can be there and enjoyed for a couple years. So I think that's nice to be able to to dot those all over town.
Well, I will just give them my endorsement of that idea. I think it's great. I think that the neighbors in Lake Grove, Lake Forest, Waluga neighborhoods especially would love to see more rotating art in addition to the parts of the permanent collection that are of course beloved and enjoyed by everyone every day. So I noticed too in we're approving, we just approved on the consent agenda some neighborhood grants, and there was a couple pads slated for art in a couple different neighborhoods, which is great. And those were specifically noted for rotating art. So is there a plan to put rotating art into neighborhoods as well?
I think so, and yes, also along with if the neighborhood is interested in a permanent piece. So I use Evergreen as an example. A few years ago, Evergreen neighborhood was awarded an NEP grant. They purchased a piece that they were interested in as a permanent piece for their neighborhood. So that's the piece that's at 10th and Chandler. Right. So that's one way that the neighborhood enhancement program can go, although now $10,000 doesn't go as far as it used to. Right. So I think that's also another reason why the two neighborhoods that were approved asked for a pad. And so that can house either a temporary piece or at one time, if they want to then purchase a permanent piece for their neighborhood, they could do that. The pad's already there. It could potentially accommodate it. But yes, we're looking at that those then would be other temporary locations for pieces because they're well-traveled not only by pedestrians, but drivers as well. They're part of the neighborhood. They're either part of an entrance or a well-congregated place in the neighborhood.
I guess and I think that's great. My comment there would just be that if we're rolling something out, that we work as best we can to prioritize the commercial centers and the highly traveled areas of town before rolling out a rotating program in still, public areas, but more so in the neighborhoods, kind of a first things first approach.
Definitely.
But I'm glad to hear all of this good information.
Well, it's always good to have more options for places for artwork to go rather than we have too many pieces and we don't have enough places to go. Right. So I think we want to kind of build in that as well.
That's great. Okay, my colleagues have questions. Councilor Raff.
Tell me about the vetting process you guys go through selecting artists for the projects we have around the city.
So it depends on the project, but for instance, like for the Gallery Without Walls process, those artists apply each year, and so there may be applications which come from 40, 50, up to 90 different artists. And then the Gallery Without Walls committee, which is comprised of not only artists who have been in the program before or been in other public programs. There are folks from the ACLO board. There are people who are citizens. That's a good cross-section of all kinds of people. Then they go through, according to our criteria, which is laid out in the public art guidelines, and look at each one of the applications. So, there's a lot of different criteria that go along with that. Is it suitable for exterior? Does it help bring variety to our collection? Is it another bronze sculpture or is it some sort of different sort of material? And I think that's why in recent years, you'll see pieces like the Delta Hill Riders, which is over at the Westlake Fire Tower. Those are photographs. We hadn't done photographs like that before, and that was a temporary piece.
I'm more interested in vetting the artists themselves, not necessarily the art. I'm just looking at the artist who has been selected for the mural, and the website is interesting. So I'm just wondering if we've really made sure, dotted all the I's, crossed all the T's, and make sure that the artists we select match the values of the city, and there's not going to be any kind of future mistakes to be made.
I think the artist was selected because of her ability to work with community, to lead a process and has done this in other communities, to take in what has been happening, assimilate those values, and bring something forward that does reflect the place and time that she's in. So we worked with Portland Street Art Alliance. They do this all the time. And so this was one of their vetted artists. And so basically it was kind of like a double process
And-
that we went through.
and we have the ability to we have off-ramps during this process. I just want to make sure that whatever we put in the city is positive to a certain degree, right? I don't, sometimes I've been in situations where artists use projects to make a statement that may not be in line with what our goals are, and I just want to make sure that we all kind of are keeping our eyes open and making sure that we don't get in a position that we don't want to be in. So that's all I'm saying.
Definitely.
So,
That's why there's always a contract.
awesome.
Yes. We have a number of different ways that the contract can be ended by both the artist, us, whomever. So I think also built into that whole process, because there is a committee, there's, just like you guys, it's baked into the whole process. It's not just one person. It's not me and Melissa
Right.
sitting in my office going, I think I'd like to have this artist. It's a public process.
Sure.
So,
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
and we always have the option to say no.
And you had the community involvement as well.
How were the listening sessions?
They were great. They were very good. We had good responses, good conversations, really great folks who brought objects, brought stories. So those were really helpful. And then Sarah is following up, and there are individuals who she may reach out to. So I think all in all, it was very positive.
Great. Councilor Mans.
First of all, thank you for all of the work that everyone in the Arts Council, volunteers, staff, the whole gamut has done to bring us to this point. I just want to clarify with, and I believe you let the mayor know this, when we are placing art in neighborhoods, that is not specifically a part of the Gallery Without Walls, correct? If someone wanted to walk through a neighborhood, they could, or does that appear on our Gallery Without Walls?
So to clarify, and I think what you're asking is, if we have a pad that is put in a neighborhood,
right?
If the neighborhood has asked for a grant, they can put whatever they'd like on it. But what this iteration is that the two neighborhoods requested so that they could have a pad, and that then sculpture could be placed there at some time in the future.
Okay.
So it either would be a rotating piece that would be listed in the brochure, just like the rest of the Gallery Without Walls pieces. Or if they wanted to, purchase a piece in future that they didn't want to be part of the collection, that would be an option, I suppose, as well.
Okay, so
Does that help?
Yeah, no, that
Does that-
explains
Okay.
it. So it is not set in stone, no pun intended, but it can be decided at a later date.
Yes,
Okay.
definitely. It could be temporary, it could be a permanent piece, it
Right.
could sit there vacant. But it's a location. Basically, it's just another location.
It's another location. My other question is, and I'm going to dive into a part of town that really isn't my part of town, being a South Sider, would be Boone's Ferry and the work that we've done on Boone's Ferry. And I think the mayor touched on this. It would be lovely, and again, this is aspirational, and it's not an ask, it's aspirational, that we put something together, even if in the planning stages, of how we can have some sort of Gallery Without Walls along Boone's Ferry. I know that's an entirely different walking area, and it has a different vibe, a different feel. Traditionally, old downtown, if you will, has been the focus of that. I know people love art, and is that area becomes more popular with diners, with walkers, with drivers, because we can't negate the fact that people drive by and they see something and find it interesting. It would be a fabulous thing. Has there been any talk around that? Working on a plan with the business folks in Boones Ferry, art folks in Boones Ferry, et cetera?
I think that's always an option.
Okay.
There are a number of pieces that are located along Boones
Right.
Ferry, as well as, there was a piece purchased by Mercado Grove. And I think that will also be part of the next iteration of the Public Art Master Plan. How has our city changed pretty radically in the last 5 years? When I look at that 2016 Public Art Master Plan, there are a lot of things in there that, we can tick off our list. And so I think being able to, what's our next stage? I think that's always on the table.
Awesome. As many things have changed from 2016. Yes, indeed.
A few,
So thank you
yeah.
very much for that. Just wanted to throw that out there. That wasn't an ask. Want to be perfectly clear for everyone watching us on TV. Thank you both very much.
Counselor Winland.
Well, thanks very much. Always look forward to this update because it's always one of the fun subjects that we get to talk about. And it's a very visual process, so it's something you can see. A couple things. I wanted to find out how your new space is working downstairs.
It's pretty fantastic.
Oh,
Have you been in?
Yes, but I mean, it's working for you?
It is.
Okay.
It is. You always would like more space, but it's beautiful. It works really well. It functions well for us. We're able to do the things that we need to. We can present really amazing artists like Sarah Seastream, who's an internationally renowned artist, downstairs in our gallery, as well as, have programs and events, and, we're getting back into all of those things. So, no, I think it works really well. We love it.
Good. One project that we have that I'm not quite sure how it ties into things is the North Anchor project, which will have a hotel and new apartments, and there's kind of some cutaways. I don't know what's the private part versus the public part, but I hope that that's part of the future planning, because I think just like we talked about Boones Ferry, once North Anchor is done, that's going to be kind of a centerpiece of, the South Anchor and the North Anchor, and you guys do such a great job of tying everything together and taking a walk around town. I think people will be really excited to see maybe how that planning, and I don't know how that goes with the city, with it being sort of private versus public, whether that's but I'll leave that to you guys. But I do know that people will probably want to know that, is there going to be some sort of
Sarah
art?
that question when she comes in just a little while from Urban Development Partners. I know they have pads, and we've encouraged them to work with Nicole and her team on figuring out how to take advantage of that. But I think in addition to asking Nicole, you ought to ask UDP that question this afternoon.
Great. Yeah, I will. And then to Councilor Rapp's point about the mural down, which will be right below us, I look at the beautiful piece that you commissioned up here, and it's timeless. It has the past, the present, and the future all into it. And I'm hoping that the mural will be somewhat the same, that it's not a reflection of today, but it's a reflection of ongoing, whether it's our past, our present, our future. But it's an important part. I would take this piece of art on the building kind of out of context of some of the other gallery, or the Gallery Without Borders pieces, because those are more interpretive. When this goes on City Hall, it's going to look as a statement piece of city values, of our community, and so on. And so, I know they'll come up with something wonderfully creative, but I just want to make sure that it's something that we can live with for a long time. And I'm assuming it's going to be there for, does it have a time frame involved, or is it?
It is not necessarily a permanent piece, and that's the beauty of it, is that the frame that's there, that framework can also be taken down at any time. And the piece that we are looking at right now, I'm thinking it probably has a longevity of somewhere between 5 and 10 years, or shorter. So that's what's great about it, because it can be timely and it can also be removed whenever it needs to be. But also the very same values that went into Lillian Pitt's piece are the very same values that are being embedded in the whole process of this mural. So we have the same goals for the whole building, that it is representative of city government. It is the civic heart of the city. So that is those are just some of the lenses that the artist has to take into consideration, along with all the community input and involvement that has been shown. So yes, yeah, we're being very mindful and deliberate about the piece that goes there, for sure.
Wonderful, thank you.
Right, well, oh, yes, Councilor Ross, sorry.
I think I need to be a little more direct on this. City Hall houses our police force, and we're very proud of our police officers. Looking on the artist's website, it's very anti-police. So have we looked into that? I don't want our officers feeling like we're putting a mural that's talking down to them on our City Hall. That's what I'm concerned about.
And that's why there's approval of all the designs that happen before they go up.
However, it's still the artist who has a stance that can come through, even if the art is different than the artist, which it typically is. I don't want our police officers to feel uncomfortable knowing that the artist that put the piece of art there may not be a fan of police departments.
Well, I think that's why there is a community committee and selection committee that is a cross-section of Lake Oswego that is tasked with approving the design. And why this artist was interviewed and selected as being the best out of the selections that we had. And so I think we are taking all those things into consideration. And again, as the civic heart of the building, of the city, and it being the home of the police force, we know that very well. So I think that's definitely one of the items that are that are under consideration.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Nathan, Ms. Mesner, Ms. Halliday. Thank you all very much. Appreciate the update and your dialogue with us and your good work.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. So next we have a public hearing. This is Resolution 22-24. It's a resolution adopting standards and procedures to be used in hiring a city attorney. So I'll turn this over to Mr. Luce to review the parameters of this particular hearing.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yeah, it's a little awkward. I do thank you for the time I was here. I understand it was cut short a bit. Just for the public's information, I am going back to Minnesota, and yes, it's in large part for hockey-related purposes, but my oldest daughter's gonna be playing on a hockey team out there, and we're not quite ready to have her living on her own or building with a family. This process does require a public hearing. The public hearing is a legislative process, so any member of the community has up to 5 minutes to speak. Any member of any represented neighborhood association, homeowners association, or government agency can have up to 10 minutes to speak.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Luce. All right, and Ms. Phelan.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Megan Phelan, Assistant City Manager. The purpose of this public hearing is to adopt the standards and procedures to be used in the recruitment and selection of a city attorney. The city attorney position is a charter officer and therefore hired by the City Council. I've reached out to various executive search firms requesting proposals. Once an executive search firm is retained, the hiring process will begin by advertising the position to solicit applications from qualified applicants. The recruiter will prepare a list of semifinalists for the council's consideration and invite selected candidates for an interview with the council. Of course, a comprehensive and complete background check will be performed on any final candidates, and further interviews or any final discussions shall occur in executive session. Once a final candidate has been tentatively identified, they will be appointed city attorney in an open public meeting. I think it's important to mention that throughout the entire process, the city will honor the commitments of confidentiality of candidates to the fullest extent possible within the requirements of the Oregon Public Meetings Law and Public Records Law. Resolution 2224 has been drafted for council's consideration and outlines the standards and procedures to be used for hiring a city attorney. However, since this is a public hearing, the standards and procedures may change based on public testimony or, of course, through council consideration and discussion. Before I turn it over to see if there's any questions from council, I would like to say I've enjoyed my time working with Jason. I'm going to miss him.
Okay, does anyone have any questions? Councilwoman.
So if I understand you, did you say that we have to follow this procedure precisely?
Yes, it has to be adopted through resolution as an outline of the process by which we move forward in order for us to have conversations in executive session to consider candidates at a later time.
Okay. So as part of the recruiting process, if somebody came and it was the perfect candidate, can the council still elect not to go through the process of going through a headhunter and everything else?
Ideally, the person would be referred to the recruiter to be included as part of the process.
Ideally.
Yes.
Correct. Okay. But through this, again, this process, though, it has to go through that.
Yeah, I mean, I would refer to the city attorney, but my understanding, if council wishes to just directly hire somebody and not go through this process, I don't believe that process is outlined here.
Okay.
They'd have to do it in open session.
Correct.
Right.
That's, I mean, no, it's not that you couldn't do it, it's just you couldn't do it in exec session.
Correct.
So this is the only way you can do this in executive session, is to go through this process?
Correct. That's state law sets it both that way. So for the 2 charter positions, well, 3 technically, the judge can do that too, but you have to go through this process.
Okay.
Otherwise, you're doing public interviews, which gets a little weird.
Could be awkward.
I've done it before, though.
Right. Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilman Windland. Okay. Any other questions? All right, well, we'll open this public hearing. I'll ask Ms. Linder if we have anyone here to testify on this matter.
No, Mayor.
Okay, then we'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
Oh. You want move to adopt resolution 22-24?
Okay, a second. All right, is there any discussion?
If we don't pass this, can Jason not resign? Right. I just have some comments to make that while it's been a short tenure, Jason, you have done a phenomenal job, and we appreciate you tremendously. You seamlessly came in here, and you had gigantic shoes to fill with David Powell, who had been here for, I think, 3 centuries, and helped write most of the code of Lake Oswego. And we hope that we'll be as lucky and as fortunate in finding your replacement. But we truly appreciate everything you've done, and we know that we can't compete with family, and I'm glad that you have family values above everything else. So anyway, that's the only reason why we would be supporting you leaving, so.
Councilor Wynn?
I just had a quick question. I was looking at the document, and the bullet point C is saying be a member of good standing of the Oregon State Bar. Are we only limiting it to people that are licensed in Oregon? Could it be a candidate that comes from out of state?
I believe we do look to candidates from out of state so long as they can get board certification within a certain specific time frame that council will have to determine what's reasonable for that.
And Oregon allows, when I came to Portland, I'd go through that. They'd actually allow you to practice for a period of time while your application's pending. So it's actually relatively easy.
I thought Oregon was waiving the bar exam now, even for new lawyers, so.
I learned how to make a gin and tonic and whiskey sour. Oh, never mind, different kind of bar.
Okay, any other discussion? No? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Ms. Phelan. Okay. Moving on to council business, we have Parks and Rec Director. Do you need a break? Yeah, okay, we'll take a 5-minute recess. Okay, we're back in session. We're moving on to item 9.1, which is the pickleball court placement process. And to walk us through this is Director Anderholt. Welcome. Good to have you here.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Ivan Anderholm, Parks and Recreation Director. I'm here this afternoon to discuss, after the July 5th meeting, we were directed by council to come back with an outline of a process, framework for a process to look at location of pickleball courts in Lake Oswego. So what I've included in the council report is the initial draft of the process, highlights of the process. In the framework of the process is to have a public process where we involve a task force that's made up of citizens of Lake Oswego, stakeholders, i.e. pickleball players. We're thinking pickleball players, tennis players, representative from Lake Oswego School District, general public members, as well as a member or two from our Parks Board. The idea on that is then to take that task force and a small team of our staff. The process will be led by one of our project managers, Kara Hager, will be the lead on the project. And then we will conduct public outreach to the public in general. But as we get the task force together, one of the first things we need to do is draft and finalize criteria for placement of pickleball courts. In the document that I shared with you, we've put some minimum requirements that we've determined through the department, but it is by no means the finalized criteria. And I think that the Citizen Task Force is going to be really important in helping us create that and finalize that criteria. As it's spelled out, once we look at the criteria, decide the criteria, then we'll move forward with a community-wide survey about pickleball. So we're in the process of actually crafting a survey. And really the survey is to ferret out the importance relative to other things. And this is, we have all of the data of, we have pickleball courts, they're super busy, everybody loves pickleball. But I think that it's important that we take do some analysis as to where pickleball is within the community with other activities that take place in the community, and that we validate that pickleball is important to Lake Oswegans. After that process is done and we look at the refined criteria, our staff will be working to put together, essentially we're going to go into GIS and we're going to identify properties, both publicly owned by the city, possibly by the school district, possibly by some of our faith community, possibly privately owned properties that have potential for pickleball courts and meet our minimum criteria. Once we identify those, then we'll take those back to the task force with the information that we have, and we'll start taking a look at applying those and hopefully prioritizing those sites based on what the task force feels would be the next step. From that step, we would like to take and look at those and come up with a short list of recommended possibilities. And then with those recommended possibilities, go back and dig deep into things like cost, things like land use appropriateness, and we'll do a really deep dive into those and then bring that information back to the task force and hopefully with that information be able to come up with a prioritized list, if not a preferred option long term. The other thing that's not outlined in the process that we have is we also believe that it's important to have the conversation with the task force on the transition between now and when we can build courts, of what we're going to do and what where pickleball is going to be played in Lake Oswego. So that will also be a consideration that did not show up in this draft. There are a number of things within the criteria that we believe that we've actually honed in on, looking at slopes, natural resource constraints, distance from residences and other businesses that may be affected. And then the other is just the volume, the space that it would take in order to place pickleball courts, because as I commented on July 5th, it's not just about plopping down pickleball courts somewhere. People will drive to the pickleball courts, and you need to accommodate a place for them to park if you don't already have parking. So we're going to take that into the consideration. At this time, in working with our staff, we are anticipating that in order to do this process and to do the public process as well as do the evaluation of the properties, that we believe that we can complete this and get back to council with a recommendation within 120 days. And so that's what we're proposing at this point. So I'm available for any questions you may have.
Okay.
Or suggestions.
You have any question? Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Councilman, though.
One of the things on the pickleball court that is currently at George Rogers Park is that there's 6 courts. Is there any rationale for having, 6 courts, playing doubles means 24 paddles and 12 balls, I think. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is
12, yeah, it's just 6 balls.
6
One
balls.
ball per-
Oh, 6 balls.
6
That's
balls,
right.
24
6
people.
balls. Yes, thank you. I knew there was experts in the audience that would know. The big picture, though, if you take a court and you separated those 6 courts in different areas, is there some sort of study or some sort of rationale to say, by dividing, you're not creating as much volume of noise? Or is it just a foregone conclusion that 1 ball is as bad as 6 balls?
I haven't personally seen any data that relates directly to that. I mean, there's some common sense, yeah, more balls are going to create more noise. I think more important than saying is having 2 courts somewhere or 6 courts important. And I think that this is part of the criteria in really getting down to what the criteria should be, is having that conversation with the stakeholders within the community to find out what is kind of the optimal amount of courts. We know from engaging with the pickleball community that pickleball, and I think that the pickleball community came and testified to the council on the 5th, that it is a very social sport. So if you had individual pickleball courts, I think that would degrade from it, but to what amount, I think that we will need to have some consensus building as we work with the stakeholder group and the task force to identify what the criteria is. And I'm hoping that out of that we'll have some sort of direction of, are we looking for 4 courts, 6 courts, 8 courts, 20 courts, 2 courts, whatever that is. But I don't feel qualified that I can sit here and tell you that we can do 2 courts here, 2 courts there, 2 courts at this point. I think the task force will help us identify what that criteria is.
Okay, because that may be, one strategic viewpoint of looking at it is, I'm not saying take them all down to little mini courts all over the place, because it is a social game for sure. But I guess I look at pickleball as not shrinking, it's going to grow. And so mitigating sort of getting feedback from the LO Pickleball Club to find out how they best operate, and then also free time, how other community members operate as well, just so that, if you want to go play pickleball court, are all the courts in just one location in the city, or are they spread out a little bit so that there's more possibility for more casual play to go in the neighborhoods? Well, maybe not in the neighborhoods, but wherever there's 300 feet circumference. So, thanks.
Okay. Counselor Mance.
Thank you. If I am not yet able to talk about this, in fact, in light of the fact that we haven't had a task force or anything else, please stop me. I'm looking at everyone here. As we know, our city's built out. We are not even Westland in that degree, nor are we Wilsonville or anywhere else that has large swaths of land. My question is, pretty much anywhere we go within our existing parklands, and that may not be true, this is in my imagination, we're going to encounter some of the same issues. Will we be looking within this task force or within this group for land that we may or may not already own that is not parkland per se? Will that be a part of the paradigm that we're going to try to figure out, provided, of course, that it's X number of feet away from homes or businesses that aren't jackhammering or any other type of thing of that nature?
Yes, so the intention is that the task force and staff will look at properties that are both owned by the city and then also that are possibly privately owned, as well as that we don't own, and also other publicly owned properties that exist. So we won't just be looking at parkland, we'll be looking at, based on the criteria, the most appropriate place for community pickleball courts in the community. And that's kind of the objective of the task force work, is to identify those and make recommendations.
Great, and then a very quick follow-up question on that. If there were something that were an indoor space that could be converted, say, for example, or fit the criteria, would that be under consideration as well?
I'm hoping that it will be, and
Okay.
we intend as staff to bring that up as well.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for answering those questions.
Thanks, Counselor Mance. Counselor Nguyen.
I just had a couple questions with regards to the pickleball task force, right? I know that we've got a few group of stakeholders in there, but would that also include neighborhood associations as well?
Not specifically at the beginning of the process, but I think that as we work through the criteria, I think that it's important, knowing what we know now about the potential impact of pickleball, that when we get to that second stage of identifying some potential locations, that part of the process is to reach out specifically to those neighborhood associations where we're looking at where it seems to fit the criteria. So that's not included in the process now, but I know that we've internally had that conversation about where that might be. You know, we don't want to be in a situation where the task force does the work, we come up with a technical answer and some options for council, and then not have had that conversation with the neighborhood association where the pickleball courts could end up. Obviously, the neighborhood associations have a very intimate understanding of their neighborhoods, more so than we do as city staff or even our citizen task force members. So I think that it's important at the point that we get to where we're really looking at what we feel are technically good solutions or possible solutions that we engage.
I would argue that I think we need to get neighbor association input sooner rather than at the outset, because I think that just because they may not have testified today or may not have been vocal in the beginning, I think that would be good just to kind of help us to kind of, because I think that the neighbor association has a good pulse on the individual characteristics of each neighborhood, just so that we don't get down to a path. We've seen it before where we've gone down a path thinking that we've thought things through, and we find out that we haven't fully vetted it. So I think that we might want to have consider having some neighborhood association involvement, and maybe have this the individual citizens kind of voice their concerns through the neighbor association, so that, because that's going to make an impact on the neighborhood. So next question will be around the process. I know that I see two processes here. There's the location feasibility analysis process and then the community engagement process. Are you proposing that the 120 days would cover both processes?
Yes. Yeah, they'll run concurrently. The communication process and the technical review will run concurrently.
So on that topic, so if we're going to be considering vacant land along with the different locations, would you be able to make a determination if there was a vacant land and we wanted to decide to put a pickleball location there? Would it have to go through planning? Wouldn't that take more time to take?
It depends. It depends if it's existing parkland, probably not.
But if we're considering potentially private as well, that might be
I think all those things are going to end up being your time considerations. I think at the end, that's one of the reasons you're going to want this project advisory committee is you're going to be trading off different factors, budget factors, time factors, location factors, and you're going to want some guidance from the folks about which ones of those things are most important. I guess I want to say out loud, 300 feet is the length of a football field. It's very difficult for me to think of any property the city owns that's parkland that's 300 feet a football field length from the closest residence. It's just very hard for me to think. So I actually think you're going to get down to the available properties pretty quickly. And then I think you're going to have a discussion about the trade-offs that you want to confront. So I do think that getting some public advice about speed versus budget versus location versus all the courts together is going to be really important for the council.
Do you feel confident that within 120 days we'll be able to get to a decision point? If there are properties that are available, we'll be able to identify them within 120 days?
I believe so, yeah. In talking to our staff, I'm confident that we'll be able to do the process and come back before council.
Right.
In that time
Not
frame.
that I want a question and answer now, but I think it might be something we be thinking about ahead of time too. What happens if we can't find a suitable site? Then what? Then, not to be answered now, but hopefully you've got a tall order. You've got a lot of work, and as you've seen already, there's a lot of people very passionate about this topic. So, yeah, I'll leave my comments there. Thank you.
Okay. I'm thinking about this, Councilor Wynn's comments about the, the community engagement, and I think one of the difficulties is including representatives from, all of the many neighborhoods, some which aren't organized, so trying to think around that. Is there a way? Transparency, I think, going through the process, any process we do is important. So these meetings will have these PAC meetings, public meetings, as they always are, and then maybe having at least some time set aside, like we do at the council meetings, for people to give some input as the process is ongoing. Would it be important so that folks who aren't on the PAC that want to weigh in can give some advice?
I wondered too about the Stop at Your Community Roundtable, as Councilor Wynn was talking, because there's no way to appoint a representative from every neighborhood association to the project advisory committee, but I agree with him that if we wait too long, that you'll just create opposition to the recommendation. And so maybe we can find another existing avenue to get the feedback as opposed to just having folks who are in the know show up.
Right, yeah, I agree. Thank you, yeah, very important.
Yep.
You touched on another piece of this that wasn't in the staff report that I think is critical, and I just wanted, if you could kind of go back to it, a discussion on the transition between now and so is that part of as we have the two processes outlined, the community engagement and the siting, and so is that a third process that kind of you're envisioning there?
I think that it's wrapped into the technical portion as well as the two portions. I think it'll be something that's discussed. So when I say the transition from where we're at with George Rogers to where we ultimately may have new court somewhere in the community, I think that part of the task force role in their recommendations to council, there's going to be the timeliness question, obviously the cost, the location, but also how do we transition the pickleball seasons, because that'll be something that we dive into, because based on where the best location is, there is everything from, don't want to say ministerial, but there may be a ministerial all the way through a major development application. So there is a time frame there. And with that, I think that there needs to be consideration as to what is going on at George Rogers during that time frame. And, you know, and I'm not here to say that government works super quick and we can just do it, but I do know in our park planning that depending on if the level of development, the zoning of the property, where it's located, there is going to be some sort of process, and that process may take time that is not really something that we can shorten up or jump over the top of.
Right.
So,
well, I think that's an important, you know, clarification in the decision the council has made to go forward with this process while looking into alternate sites and citing criteria around pickleball. That you know, my call, you all correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, we've given we put something temporary in place. And as I know, we have folks here asking that today, you know, we close the pickleball courts, and you know, we decided at the last meeting that we're not closing the courts right now. They're going to stay open for the season, right? That decision's been made, but that doesn't mean they're going to stay open forever, you know, until, you know, depending on how long this process. I think all of us are sensitive to what's taking place in the neighborhood. We're trying to find a balance, but when we understand that depending on how long this process takes, that balance could be tipped, you know, in addition. So there's a, so I guess I just want everyone to understand that, you know, that is where we're at with this, that there will be future, you know, decisions to make based on the information that this process unveils. But I also think it's really good, the process we've gone through at the Parks Board, all of the good information we've gathered. I imagine that is what's going to kickstart this siting process, because there was lots of good information gleaned from the work we've already, you know, been doing on this topic. So, but yeah, I hope that provides some clarity for the community. So, because we're not looking to change anything right now, we want to go forward with the process, but once we go forward with this process, there will be other decision points. I know some neighbors expressed concern about how long the process could take. I don't want people thinking, you know, this is going to go on for years and years with no change, you know, whatsoever. So, appreciate that. All right. So are you looking to, what's your timeline to start this process? You know, you gave the 120 days.
I wanted to hear from council and get direction from council if they agree that with the process to initiate it, and then we're ready to initiate it now. We've done some preliminary work on it, and so we're ready to initiate and start reaching out and identifying task force members.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Process seems good. Yeah. I mean, the process seems good to me.
Yeah.
Just encourage the public nature of it, being transparent and allowing for that feedback loop, I think, throughout the process would be important. Yes, Councilor Rapp.
And I would just encourage everybody who's here, who's listening, who reads the LO review afterwards, that if you have an interest in how this process proceeds, you need to be involved. Yes, it's one thing to come to city council meetings and say your piece, but, you know, don't armchair quarterback this one. Get involved.
Okay. All right.
Excellent. Thank you,
Director. Appreciate it. Okay. Next on our agenda, item 9.2, is our 2023 legislative priorities. We have Ms. Thiesing here to review.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council. I'm Madison Thiesing, Assistant to the City Manager, and today's item is actually the League of Oregon Cities legislative agenda. So every long session, so what we're going to be entering into, the League creates policy committees to set forth an agenda based off of big policy buckets, basically. And these policy committees are composed of elected officials and staff from around the state. They then analyze different policy topics, different things that had come from the legislature the session before, themes that we continue to carry on, so property tax, unfunded mandates, things like that. And they propose a slate, which is then what is sent out to all the cities. And then from there, we are able to select our top 5 policy issues that we would like the league to prioritize. And it was a long list. So staff initially went through it with the exec team, narrowed it down to 9. And what I have in front of you today is those 9. And I am asking for council direction to narrow those 9 down to 5.
And we're just submitting these then to the league?
Yes.
And they'll be compiled with the preferences from
From everyone
cities,
else,
yeah.
yes.
They email asking.
One vote.
You get 1 vote, so this is your vote right now.
And now this is separate from our own legislative priorities.
Correct, yes. So this is what the league will advocate on behalf of the entire state for all cities. So our vote is one of many votes for these top 5 issues. I will come back in December time with an agenda for the city, which will go into a lot more details of what our values and goals will be for the legislative session.
Could be some overlap.
There most likely will be some overlap.
And our agenda will more likely be tied to your council goals.
Right.
And our master plans as well.
Right. Okay, well, it's a good way to, that's a good lens through which, to look at this prioritization, like what would we want the league to focus on versus, there can be obviously similarities. Okay, so you're just looking to hear from each of us individually on our top 5.
I think I'm gonna go low tech, not the fancy way of what you do at council retreat. And I'm gonna go through each one and you just raise your hand if you want that to be a part of your top 5. So you have 5 votes, you will raise your hand. I will tally.
Does that work?
Does that work for everyone?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. You only get 5 times. I'm not.
I've got mine.
5 votes?
Yeah. So you have 5 votes. There will be 9 on the slide. I will walk through all 9 to begin with. So think about it. This is not a quorum vote. This is not a quorum vote.
They gave me their.
I get 15 votes.
This is not quorum. This is just policy direction.
Absentee vote.
Absentee. So again, low tech. We're going to do hand raising.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Okay, so Carrie's going to show the slide. So again, this was initially vetted from staff and the executive team. The reason why these 9, which we're going to make down to 5, rose to the top because they focused on infrastructure funding, which continues to be one of our priorities, avoiding unfunded mandates and requirements, providing additional resources to local decisions and rulemaking, and then lastly, opportunities to advance our current city council goals for 2022. So that's how these 9 rose to the top for us, being staff perspective. It is now your decision to narrow these 9 down to 5. So the first one being full funding and alignment with state land use initiatives, so providing funding and more direction to cities when we're making these land use rulings and policies. Number 2, and this is not in ranking order. Number 2, infrastructure funding to support needed housing. So this is asking for more budgeted to infrastructure when we're talking about housing. 3, community resiliency and wildfire planning. This is technical resources, policy direction, and funding. 4, address the Measure 110 shortcomings. I'm going to try to explain it the best I can. So Measure 110 allowed a citation to be waived if someone was going through additional treatment support. The policy idea is that we're no longer going to be waiving that citation, or we are still able to have a citation And we would like to exercise that right to be able to cite someone for drug use, I believe is. I'll come back to that one if I don't quite understand it. 5 is building decarbonization, efficiency, and modernization. This is the REACH code coming back. So advocating to have a local option to have a REACH code. I don't know which number I'm on. Adequate funding for state climate initiatives. So providing more funding for anything that's coming from the state down to the local level, we would like funding for. Property tax reform, Measure 50, Measure 5. Last 2 is transportation safety enhancement. This is allowing local authority to have speed changes, more funding to safe routes to school, infrastructure for pedestrian and safety measures. And then lastly is infrastructure financing and resiliency. So this is for water, roads, I think, and wastewater. So these are the 9. So I'm gonna go one by one, and you get to raise your hand for your 5. Okay, shall we start?
You have a question?
Or do you have a question?
No, I was just going to give you my 5.
All right.
Well,
Oh, you want to do that way?
you want us to give the 5?
Okay, that we can do it that way. Going one by one?
Okay, Counselor.
Okay.
May I
Okay,
give
you
you
gonna
my
write it down?
top 5?
Yeah, you go first.
Okay, I'll go first.
Write it down, okay.
Okay, my first one is, believe it or not, community resiliency and wildfire planning.
Okay.
My second one is transportation safety enhancement. This might be a little bit of out of order as I go through this. My third one is infrastructure financing and resilience. My fourth one is the infrastructure funding to support needed housing. And my 5th one, and not necessarily my top one, is adequate funding for state climate initiatives, simply because I think that's being squashed at the federal level. So there you go.
Thank you.
Okay. Counselor, you want to go next? Okay. Counselor Nguyen, you want to go next?
I'm waiting for my 5th, I'm doing my 5th one right now.
He's running for office.
I'm taking notes too.
I would like other things on the list, actually. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, I do think there should be some other things on the list. I would do the property tax reform. I would do the wildfire planning. I would address the Measure 110 shortcomings, because pretty much the whole thing is a shortcoming. And then I would do transportation safety enhancement and infrastructure financing and resilience.
Thank
you. I would say, well, I'll just say, so originally, when I saw just the list, you know, the titles, I saw the Measure 110 shortcomings, I was like, oh, great, I'm glad the league is focused on this. But then I read what they saw as the shortcomings, and I was honestly a little disappointed.
I am disappointed too, but.
Yeah, because I mean, the issue here with 110 is that it's only the funding, the 300 million they had in this first biennium, I guess, too, is only funding these kind of soft services, what they call low barrier. And it's not funding what I think a lot of us, when we were told this would fund treatment, it's not funding actual traditional medical inpatient treatment that most people who are suffering from a substance abuse disorder need. It's funding harm reduction, service, like things that are not bad, but they're just not the inpatient. Like if you're suffering from an opioid addiction, you don't call a hotline and get better. You know, you don't go to peer. You need to be medically withdrawn from the drug. You need inpatient treatment, and that's not what this is funding, because their logic is that, well, this Medicaid pays for the for patient treatment, but the reality is that most people who are insured, even their insurance does not. Well, one, Oregon doesn't have the beds, so there's that. Even if you're insured, The only people right now who have like pure access to treatment are wealthy people who can pay out of pocket, period. That's it. Other times, we know the runaround you get from insurance, I like to go to treatment. Well, do you really need to go to treatment? Let's get you on the phone with someone and talk about your addiction. And we'll set up an appointment for a couple weeks from now. Well, we don't really know if you need inpatient treatment, because we don't want to pay for that. So, let's get you into some outpatient program. I mean, it's a joke. And then, of course, for people who can't afford treatment, even if when they can get into treatment, it is paid for by Medicaid. We don't have those beds, and as we know many times, by the time people make it to treatment, they've already died. So I was just surprised that the shortcomings weren't working to address the lack of funding and creating more actual treatment or diverting some of the funding they've set aside for these low barrier services, which again aren't unimportant. They're just part of the continuum, but not the kind of first step for most people. And I saw it was just the problem with the tickets and all of that. It's just, there's no options for people. I mean, I think the whole system is.
Well, yeah,
messed up,
but I
was
think-
just surprised to see it was so short. It was just, we have an issue with the tickets. It was like, well, okay. But there was nothing about funding the needed services.
But even if they relook at this measure, which has not worked at all, in fact, it's working against us, it's just one of those things. And nothing on here really had a very solvable issue when you looked at all the descriptions. That's why I wanted to add some specifics, but we're not, we get our one vote.
So I was, anyway, yeah, I was just disappointed to see that was what the league was focusing on. Because I know there are people who say, well, it's a big issue, but the issue is criminalizing the possession. That wasn't solving problems either. So they've done nothing to really solve the problem either way.
No, but they have, what is it, less than 3% people that refer?
Well, it's the whole thing. So it's just, yeah.
I mean, so it's not even working.
Anyone.
No, they're not helping anyone.
And they are, and the crimes that come from, I mean, that, it just decriminalizes, possession of certain small quantities of drugs. It doesn't decriminalize the criminal activity that, a lot of the property crimes and whatnot that occur as a result of
Was I supposed to
No, we were hoping that you just do the list.
Where were you? Okay. No, sorry. I'm just going off on a tangent.
Okay, no,
I couldn't help it.
I don't
No,
care.
let me
I
get in.
just
So that's
didn't
why,
want to do
anyway.
the wrong thing.
So I had building decarbonization. I know we supported that last year, the REACH, but I think that's going to need some good support. Property tax reform, the land use, I had land use initiative.
The number one, full funding.
funding.
And alignment.
Yeah, okay, full funding. Infrastructure for needed housing and the transportation safety enhancement. And the other item I did see on the list that we didn't put is the road user fee. I was surprised we didn't.
I
have that
know,
on there.
I was surprised that, yeah.
But I know, I mean, there was lots of good things on the list. So, okay.
We can put it on our list.
We can put it on.
Sure. I'll go.
Oh.
Sure. Number one for me was funding to support needed housing infrastructure. Secondly is infrastructure, infrastructure financing and resiliency. And then the Mission 110 shortcomings. And then funding for the climate initiatives. And lastly, the building decarbonization and modernization.
All right. Councilor Raff.
Councilor Raff.
Full funding and alignment of state land use initiatives. Community resilience and wildfire planning. Tell me if I need to go slower.
No.
110 shortcomings. 3, adequate funding for state climate initiatives. And property tax reform.
What was the last one?
Property tax reform. That was 5, right? Okay. I can count.
Yes, we do.
Ding. You've got them?
Oh, no, we ended up with 7. So,
But do we have top? We have 5 top, right?
What do you mean we ended up with 7?
You have 3, but you have 7. Infrastructure.
Of course.
infrastructure funding to support needed housing, community resiliency, wildfire planning, Measure 110, adequate funding for climate initiatives, property tax reform, transportation, safety enhancement, and infrastructure financing and resiliency.
May I recommend that can we do a vote over email on those to get it down to 5? No.
Well, I would only say, while I think the funding for state climate initiatives is great, I think it's going to go nowhere because of what Councilor Mann said.
Did you have that on your list?
No, but that had 3 votes.
Who else had that on their list?
What?
It had,
Did you have that on your list?
For what?
Adequate funding for state climate?
I think so.
I did. Wasn't
You had that?
that 3?
You had it.
I did.
That had 3.
Community resilience and wildfire planning.
I had that.
You did? Are you sure?
So let's just go again. Here they are.
Okay.
Let's just go again.
Do we have to do it again?
Yes, you do.
Well,
All
I
right.
didn't
How about
write
we
it
just raise our
down.
hands?
How many city councilors does it take to make a list of 5?
We can do it. So the first one is infrastructure funding to support needed housing. Climate, I'm sorry, it's 110. The next one is property tax reform. And infrastructure finance and resilience. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk with no microphone on, Carrie. So,
Why don't we do this? There's 5 of us. We each get to pick one.
Pick one.
Yeah. Yeah, why not?
that's fine.
Easy. Each
Pick
gonna
your
pick
top one.
Pick your top one.
I'll pick my.
Counselor Rath, you gotta go first.
Well, if you both pick, okay, but once it's picked.
Yeah, once it's picked,
Once it's picked, you can't pick that one, so whoever goes, right,
Yeah, exactly.
perfect.
I'm sorry, this was supposed to be low tech and.
It's great.
This is real.
No, it's great. This is great.
I am going to stick with infrastructure, financing, and resilience.
Got it.
Infrastructure funding,
Bottom one.
financing, okay. Counselor Rath?
Community resiliency and wildfire
Meyer?
I was gonna do that, but I figured you would. I figured you would.
Counselor Wynn?
Infrastructure funding to support needed housing.
Housing, okay.
6 to 1, half dozen to the other, right?
Go ahead.
There you go.
Oh, do you want, oh.
Yeah.
Just like
I'll do
you did.
property tax reform.
And property taxes are a clusterfuck. Never
And
gonna
then I'll do
happen.
building decarbonization.
Okay.
There we go.
Thank you very much.
There we go.
And no
Good
one
job.
threw another one outside of that 7. We stayed within the 7 down to 5.
Oh, wait, we
so.
have
Good
we
job.
have people in the audience. Hi.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Madison.
We will submit that and I'm,
And we'll be back to
We'll be
talk
back.
about legislative priorities later this fall.
Yes, okay. Thank you so much.
thank you.
Now, I want you to ask your baby, like, give them like toys and, see which one they pick out, if they align with us at all.
I'll mark the blocks and have 1 through
Exactly,
7 and then that
exactly.
can be our vote.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we have information from council. We have one letter. Did everyone receive the letter, also from Madison, about the Oregon Highway Plan update to the Oregon Highway Plan update specifically to the tolling policy, essentially at C4. ODOT came recently and they are updating tolling policy. So they're defining what tolling is, defining what congestion pricing is, all needed things, but they're doing it on a very tight timeline. And so pretty much everyone around the C4 table took issue with the timeline, and C4 has drafted a letter that we're sending to the Oregon Transportation Commission to allow at least 60 days more, just to provide, for instance, like we as a council, we are just talking about this now. We have not, no one has had time to even bring this back to the various city councils. I know Metro Council feels the same way. We just want, I thought, so that's the ask here, is that in addition to the C4 letter, other jurisdictions are also sending letters to Oregon Transportation Commission asking for more time. I mean, our communities, especially around here, are impacted by the tolling policy they're going to set. I mean, it defines what the kind of mitigation area is when it comes to diversion. So they've set in the draft, for instance, like a 1 mile kind of along the toll corridor. So that could mean that even though there's mitigation, away from the toll corridor, well, they're not going to fund it. And I think we just want to make sure that there's plenty of chance for the public to be engaged and somewhat that we ensure that the promises that I think ODOT made during the toll discussion aren't erased by this toll policy that they're setting, creating various, definitions. And we just want to, I think, just, make sure we have a chance to go through this. So if everyone had a chance, I think Madison's letter, the shoot drafter, is really good. Does anyone have any issues with signing that?
No, sign.
Okay.
I'm down.
Thank you. I'll do that. So now that's, let me give a quick update here too from while we're talking about it, C4. So yeah, the Oregon Highway Plan Policy Amendment, like I mentioned, this policy, it's not addressing the rates or revenues on tolls, not identifying specific investments. It's just a general toll policy. At the same time, say Metro is also updating, as we know, the regional transportation plan. They separately are putting together a congestion pricing model, and that's some of Metro's issue with what ODOT's going through is they'd like there to be more coordination. There's all these different policies being said, but completely separate from one another, yet on overlapping roadways. And obviously what ODOT does on its roadways impact our local roadways, which they don't have control over, and we don't necessarily have the funding to make the improvements needed to handle, the impact. So, I mean, there's lots of big questions there. That's really, I mean, that was such a big topic at C4. That's really all we talked about at the last at the last meeting. Just want to make sure I'm not leaving anything else here out. No, okay. I will also mention that yesterday we had a ribbon cutting for Hunger Fighters, the local food pantry. They, as some of you may know, they moved. They were at the, as we call it, the greenhouse, which was the dilapidated home on the high school campus, which we appreciate, of course, the school district allowing the organization to use. But they are doing something else with that space, and so we are. They moved up to the mountain across from. The New Seasons complex there above the gas station in Mountain Park, and we had the ribbon cutting yesterday. And then I know tomorrow the New Seasons Palisades is having their ribbon cutting, which is great news. I know that store has been. How long has that been vacant for up there? Oh, you were going to say a while. So it's great.
It's been at least 3-4 years.
Fall of 2019.
Wow.
5 years.
No.
So it's great.
3, yeah.
3 to 5 years.
So that's a big thing, especially for
It's going down.
folks living over in that neck of the woods. Okay, Councilor Mans, I'm sorry. Is that what you wanted to say?
Thank you.
Yes, tomorrow is an extraordinarily exciting day for the Hallinan Heights, South Shore, McVeigh neighborhood, and all points in between. New Seasons Market will be opening. There'll be a ribbon cutting. Our illustrious mayor will be giving a talk. And
sampling.
What?
And sampling.
Yeah.
We hope.
And samples. And I cannot tell you how many people have stopped me in the street and given me air hugs, telling me, thank you for doing that, even though I had absolutely nothing to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like Martha's over there.
Take the credit when you can get it.
Oh, I do. I give them air hugs back. So it's very, very exciting. And they're supposed to have a lot of the things that the old Palisades Market had, such as I'm hearing a wine bar and a deli and so on and so forth. On a more serious note, but nonetheless important, our Planning Commission is moving along through their goals and agendas. They really didn't have a great desire to hear me speak of pickleball and moved right into their agenda because that obviously does not impact them. They're still working on middle housing. There'll probably be more tours around town to see some of the things that have been I'm sorry, have been bothering the city with regards to buildings. So if anyone is at all interested, please reach out to either the Planning Commission, Scott Siegel, or myself for the next tour. That's it.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I just wanted to mention a couple things from public comment. First, I wanted to let you know that we're going to have Director Rooney follow up with Ms. Lippman about Stanford Road. I think you all, anyone who's made the right turn onto Stanford Road, you're familiar with what the problem is. I don't know that we can do anything about it, but we will take a look at it in partnership with the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Also, I just want to close the loop. At your last meeting, you got a proposal to amend the noise ordinance relative to landscaping equipment. None of you, I realize we had a lot of folks here to testify about pickleball that evening, but none of you followed up. I guess Jason and I have had a chance to talk about it. We recommend that you don't do that for a couple of reasons. I think, first of all, not everyone in Lake Oswego actually has commercial yard equipment, and so those of us who do our own lawns would be prohibited from mowing our lawns in the evening or on Sundays. I think that you probably don't want to create that, but also there would probably be some unintended consequences if this is applied to the golf course, and those relate to really some building height restrictions that do apply to the golf course as long as they're zoned residential. And if they were to request a rezone, you would no longer have some of those limitations on the golf course property. So I understand the neighbor is not able to resolve the conflict, and I feel bad about that, but I think amending a citywide ordinance is probably the wrong route to go unless you all are interested in that topic. So I just wanted to close the loop on that.
So can you tell us what the rule is? They can mow their yards from what time to what time?
Your current noise ordinance says that you can't make unnecessary noise, and I think the challenge here is that if you're maintaining a green or a driving range at a golf course, then mowing before your first tee time or your first appointment for use of the driving range is necessary. And so I think that's what the fundamental conflict is the golf course mows early in the morning because their first open times are 7 a.m. and so they're mowing before 7 a.m. So as I say, I appreciate and understand the issue the neighbor faces. I am, as you all know, not a morning person. However, I think the unintended consequences of taking up the noise ordinance, I think are much greater than trying to help the golf course and the neighbor resolve the conflict. I think we got to focus on the conflict as opposed to focusing on the code.
Right, but
I also
just
think
out of curiosity,
it'd be sticky if we had folks calling us saying, by the way, my neighbor's mowing their lawn outside of allowed hours. I can't guarantee you that you have the resources to send a police officer out. I'm not positive that that's where you want to be as a city.
But what are the hours that, non-golf course? 7, is it 7 to 10?
It's 7 to 10 on Monday through Friday, and I want to say it's 8. Sid would know this off the top of because of City Hall construction. It's 8 to 5 on Saturdays, and
Doesn't really apply to the landscaping though, right?
it doesn't apply to your lawnmower. Really, it's
Right.
it really
It's just
applies to construction equipment and parties. So if your neighbor's having a band in their backyard,
Has to be closed at 10.
it has to be done by 10. That's actually true.
And I do understand that the city manager, if someone brings one of these things to them, can adjust the time or?
Yeah, we occasionally we get requests from contractors who need exceptions. Sometimes we get requests from folks who are having events that they can adjust the time, but it really has to be because it's of some reason why they can't avoid the time. We don't grant those just because somebody asks. We grant them if there's some reason. For example, there's construction sometimes on main thoroughfares. You might want to not do it during commute times. So, but in general, it doesn't apply to your lawnmower.
Well, the other thing is we have a lot of properties, where the different zones abut each other. I'm thinking of residential that abuts commercial, and you have early morning, like the earliest of the early morning trash pickup in those areas, early morning deliveries, all which are allowed and all of which we also receive complaints about. So I think if we start opening up to kind of micromanage, you know, every person's issue with early morning noise. It creates quite an issue because that is just kind of part of living in the
Well, and fundamentally, I think if you were to amend the ordinance, we still might not have the resources to respond to every complaint that came. And I hate to create an expectation that we'll be able to come solve a problem when maybe mediation or some other dispute resolution process is probably a better way to go.
Take cookies and have a conversation.
It's tough. I think these two parties have tried mediation, so it may not be the right way, but I'm not positive that you want to create this conflict citywide rather than focus on the particular conflict. All right, if you're in agreement with that, that's where we'll proceed.
Indeed.
Thanks for the follow-up.
Thank you.
Can we just have a rule that when somebody blows leaves, they have to pick them up? So that they just can't do it to the neighbor next door to them and then they blow them back?
Not supposed to do.
I know that, can we enforce that? I'm just kidding.
I live in the
We should have
best
learned that
neighborhood.
at a much younger age about cleaning up our own messes, but it doesn't work that way.
Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, we will now adjourn the city council meeting and call to order the redevelopment agency and move into board business. First item on the agenda is an update on the North Anchor project. Joining us, we have Sid Sin, our redevelopment manager, and Sarah Zahn with UDP, and a colleague.
I'll introduce
Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, Chair Buck and members of the board. Again, I'm Sid Sin, Redevelopment Manager, and with me is Sarah Zahn, Chief Operating Officer of Urban Development Partners, and Bryce Postma from Hacker Architects. And we're happy to be here. I believe the last time we were before the board was in December when the board approved the disposition and development agreement. And since then, I think there's a lot of progress that's been made. I know one of the things is that council goal for this year is to ensure that the North Anchor project stays on track, and that's one of the reasons why we are doing this update, to help provide a little background information on that. So for the last 6 months, we've been working diligently with the development team, with UDP, our building department, planning, engineering department, and certainly there have been challenges, mostly of the financial nature, as we all have. But I believe we still have made a lot of progress, and that is what Ms. Zahn and Mr. Postma will provide an update on for the board. So with that, I'll pass it over.
All right. Thank you, Sid, and thank you, Chair Buck and members of the council. It's good to see you all again. Thank you very much for having us. This is Boyce from Hacker. He is the lead designer for the hotel and working also closely on the residential. So he's here to just course correct me if I say anything off point during the presentation today. But we really wanted to come in and just give you kind of an overview of what we've been doing for the past 6 months and really what the next 6 months look like. I think high level, UDP remains really excited and committed to this project. We're, continue to be really enthusiastic about working in this community. We are, see it as a very desirable place to be developing. The residential market remains extremely strong, and we're seeing residential and retail rents outpace the region in Lake Oswego, which is, a good news, bad news thing for the community. So hopefully adding some supply will help ease some of the pressures, but it's also financially strong for us as we look to underwrite the project. We're also seeing the hotel environment continue to improve. I'm sure you've heard lots of data on this, in your daily reading of the newspapers, but certainly outside of traditional group and business travel is where the hotel market has seen the greatest strides. I'm sure you've heard the buzzword of the season is revenge travel, and we're certainly seeing that in the hotel market really help bring those numbers back to pre-COVID levels, and certainly by 2024, we anticipate to be back to where we were pre-COVID. So I'm going to walk through a number of slides that we prepared today to just provide you with some updates on both the residential and the hotel project. A little agenda for you. So we have some design updates. I also wanted to give you a little update on some of the work that we've been doing with our branding partner for the hotel. A big important piece of work that we have is kind of really designing the hotel brand. As you know, it's an independent, unflagged hotel. We're not bringing it in under a flagged national concept. So creating a name and an identity for the project is a big part of the focus that we've undertaken in the last few months. We're not there yet, but I'm going to give you some sort of pre-work that we've been doing and just tease it a little bit so you can get a sense for the direction we're headed. I also wanted to just provide a little bit of an update on the capital markets and financing state of the state. As Sid alluded to, and you're all aware, the capital markets environment is challenging right now, and that is true for this project as well. So I can give you a little bit of context about how that's impacting some of the decisions we're making and the timelines that we're under. And then I'll just provide you with a overall timeline for both of the projects and leave some space for questions. So we're going to start off with an update on the multifamily design update. So we went through a pricing exercise on this project over the last few months. It had some budget constraints and challenges, which is not uncommon in basically every project that we're working on these days, or seeing cost escalations and interest rate pressures. So we embarked on a cost reduction exercise for the hotel, and we completed that in June. It was a joint effort between us, Hacker, and our contractor to really find areas where we could realize some savings. And the impact to the project on the residential side, it's not really going to be noticeable to the average person. We have not made any significant changes to the exterior. The materials are not going to change. The facade is not going to change. The one significant change that will be noticeable for people experiencing the project is that we've decided to relocate the main residential entrance of the project. If you recall, and this slide is a little small, but on the upper right, you can see the rendering and the residential entrance where residents who are walking to the building would come into the main door into the lobby was about mid-block on First. And we've decided to relocate the entrance down to mid-block on B. And there's a number of reasons that we did that are really more construction related than anything else. We saved a lot of complicated concrete, and we're able to reduce the footprint of the parking garage to really save a lot of money. And it made a lot of sense to, as a result of that, relocate that main entrance. So we actually think it works quite well. We still have retail on both sides of that main entrance. So that main entrance will just be mid-block on B instead of up on First. And the kind of courtyard area that was part of that original entrance courtyard design will still remain a courtyard. It will just be a little bit more private and will be used really as an exit for residents and more of an amenity. We will still have an amenity space for the residents that's located in that courtyard. So the design changes a little bit, but it's still in substantial conformance with our land use, and we don't think we're going to have to take it through any land use review. It'll be an administrative change, and while it does reconfigure the retail on the ground level of that portion of the west building a little bit, we're not losing significant retail square footage, and in fact, we think that the retail is working a little better now, especially for a corner restaurant concept that we hope to bring into that First and B corner. So that's the significant change that you see on that multifamily. The numbers haven't changed significantly. We actually gained one residential unit. If you recall, we were at 66. We're up to 67 units now. So that was a small change, but a good change. Our retail is still roughly 6,000 square feet. Boyce is still doing his back of the envelope calculations on that one, but that's still about where we're landing. We did lose some parking, and in part that was a cost savings decision that we made to remove, if you recall, we had a stacker system in Building C. We've decided to eliminate that. That saves us over $500,000 for 8 parking spaces, so that seemed like math we could accept. And the net result is we still have adequate parking for the building. What we are going to have to accept is that we don't have as much flexibility in the retail uses. So for future uses, we'll be limited a little bit on being able to put food and beverage uses into all of retail on the ground floor because we can't accommodate it from a parking standpoint. We have protected the corner, which I know is a priority for the board. So that corner will still be able to accommodate F&B use, and it's a little bit less than 3,000 square feet, if I recall, at that corner. But the rest of the retail will have to be non-food and beverage use. So not ideal, but from a cost perspective, it was a decision we had to make. Okay, moving on to the hotel, and I'm just gonna bring up my notes here so I don't miss anything. Let's see. So the hotel design, so just backing up a little bit on the residential. So we had submitted our permit several months back for the residential buildings, and we're pretty much almost all the way through permitting. I mean, I think we pretty much had our permit. We will go through a permit revision based on these changes I just described. There's some pretty significant structural redesign that happens in the basement that will have to go back through approval, but that will happen over the next couple of months, and we don't anticipate any hiccups with that. The hotel is a little bit behind. We've always intentionally kind of kept these on separate tracks in terms of the permitting. They went through land use together, but they are under separate building permits. So the hotel is just about to commence its construction documentation, which is sort of the last part of design that you go through while you're leading up to submitting your building permit. And the design of the hotel has changed some. Similar to the residential, we've been really focusing on costs and figuring out ways to improve our costs. But the design of the hotel was less advanced, so we had more opportunity to sort of make some easier changes there. The significant change, and I'm sorry that this graphic is a little bit difficult to read, but wanted to put it up here just so I could illustrate some of the changes. Part of this is that the hotel just isn't as advanced in design, so we don't have as advanced drawings. The two graphics here that you see represent the north elevation, and if you think about where that is on that site, it's the elevation that faces north and is adjacent to the little alleyway that we've designed in between the alley and First Avenue or First Street so that there's a pedestrian walkway there. So there's a building just to the north of this, and this is out on an alley, so it's not a very prominent elevation. Obviously, we think all of the elevations are important, but this one is not a street-facing elevation. We've made some changes to this elevation, and the list is on the right, so you'll notice the windows look different. We've right-sized the windows for the hotel interiors. A lot of this is really that those are large windows on the top that you see in the prior elevation. We brought them down to a scale that felt better for that elevation and for the experience from the interior of the hotel. We also made a few technical changes. The kitchen venting was previously, you can kind of see it on the top elevation. There's a little hole and a little gray area on the kind of looking out. That was where the kitchen vent came out previously. We've relocated that over onto the alley side on the west elevation, and you'll see that in the next slide. And then another move is that we've relocated our trash room from that alley, and it's actually in the garage now. And so the hauler is actually happier with that, works a little better for them. It'll be less noisy for the neighbors. So those were good moves. And then there's some slight adjustments you can see in that walkway and the kind of how steep it is and how the access from the street level works if you're a pedestrian walking from First up through the alley, but those are fairly minor. And then this is the west elevation. So this is the elevation that faces out to the car alley that runs along that elevation. And again, we've looked at a few adjustments here, right-sized windows here. Another big move you can see on the top, there's an elevation, or there's a area that kind of has a bump out, and that was a stair that actually kind of came out into the alley from the building, an exit stair, and we've actually pushed that back into the building and flattened that elevation out a little bit. And it's done a couple of things. It has made the building more efficient, less area taken up by that stair. We're using that in other places where we think it's more important. It actually creates a better visibility line from that alley for cars. And then we've been able to add in on the bottom elevation, you can see we are turning the corner with those recessed planters that are also along First Avenue, if you remember. So that will kind of turn the corner and create kind of a nice visual continuity for those, that feature. And then that's just adjacent to the entry to the parking area. So those are the significant changes. And again, we've vetted these through the planning team and believe that these are administrative level changes that won't require us to go back through a design review process. We're still confirming that with them, but that's the impression that we have at this point. So then I wanted to show you some fun pictures after we look at kind of the, you know, the plan-based ones. You've seen a few of these before. These are a little bit more advanced. This is a view of the hotel entrance terrace. So at First and B, when you come in, we've created an outdoor area with seating and a fireplace and some benches and landscaping. There's two separate entrances here, one for the restaurant and one for the hotel. We want those to be very specific and separate and distinct because we will have a lot of visitors coming to the restaurant who are not necessarily coming to the hotel and vice versa. So we've created separate entrance paths for them. And this is just a sense of some of the materials that we're exploring, you know, very natural materials, wood, warmth, light, you know, really creating a sense of entry into the hotel. This is a rendering of the hotel lobby area. It's a lovely double height space right now. So when you come in, there's this kind of sense of openness. Again, you'll see another fireplace, see the elevators beyond. This is sort of the area where you would come in and check in and, you know, wait to go up to your room, maybe sit, have a cup of coffee, and those sorts of things. This is a view, it's a little bit less developed than the others. You can see we've created a private dining space on the second floor. We have a mezzanine space up there that's kind of hidden in the core of the building, and it's a space that we've heard is in demand in Lake Oswego. There's not a lot of opportunity for private dining, so this is a place where we could have meetings, private dining. It's connected to the kitchen. It will be served by a small little pantry area, so everything from birthday parties to corporate events, we can accommodate a larger group sitting down in this space here. So we think this will be a really special and unique space kind of in the hotel on the second floor, tucked up and behind. And just a reiteration of where we are on the numbers. So the hotel's about a 50,000 square foot building. One of the things that we've worked through and been successful at is adding some additional rooms. So we're actually up to 83 rooms. We were at 77 before. So that's a nice increase and also helps with some of the cost issues that we're encountering because those rooms are accretive to the bottom line. So that's been a really nice effort by our team to really maximize the room count. We're still at about 100 seats in our restaurant, which is great. That'll be a nice size restaurant for downtown Lake Oswego. And we have 76 parking stalls. If you recall, we have this kind of elaborate valet system that we're using to park here. So 65 of those spaces are contained within the building and then 11 are street parking. Okay, so I'll stop there and just give me a second to make sure I haven't missed anything. I want to make sure I took a lot of notes because I felt like I had a lot of updates to give you. I think we're good. So the next thing I'm going to show you is just a little bit about our branding concept. So we've engaged a local design firm called After All to help us with some branding and restaurant concept. And I think one of the really fun things that they've done is they've really engaged with the community on this. They've done a lot of interviews, almost 36 interviews. Maybe some of you have even talked to them. But they reached out to a lot of folks in the community to talk about what appeals to this community, what's special about Lake Oswego, what's missing, what do we need, what do you feel like is the thing about Lake Oswego that will resonate with hotel guests and restaurant guests. So a lot of that comes out of this. And this is still pretty high level. I'm not going to tell you the name of the hotel yet because we haven't totally settled in on it. We're still debating a little bit, but we're getting a lot closer. So this is a lot of words, but we established a number of brand foundations for the hotel. And I'm just going to kind of briefly read through these because I think they're important. Something that's well received and beloved by residents. something that's interesting yet timeless, not trendy, infused with character and charm, and with just the right amount of patina. So it doesn't feel totally new, but it's not an old building either. New and worldly elements with an approachable vibe attract visitors who might not usually think to stay in Lake Oswego. Define potential partners in programming that feels ownable and needed in Lake Oswego, and establish the property as a beacon that will attract additional amenities to the area. So those are our brand foundations. These are some of our brand attributes. So we want this place to feel warm. We want it to feel like people, you come in and people are greeting you with a smile. We want it to feel magnetic, keep people coming back again and again. We want it to feel radiant. We want it to create warmth when the Pacific Northwest is at its dreariest. And just a side note, we have designers and hotel operators who aren't from the Pacific Northwest, and we keep having to remind them, 5 months out of the year, it's really dark and cold and wet here. So you come in the summer, it's amazing. It's different in the winter, so you have to keep that sense of warmth. It's transportative. So it's not a total escape. You're not going to the beach, you're not going to wine country, but it's just enough to feel like you're somewhere else for the night. And finally, it's celebratory. So I love this line, everybody loves it when the entire restaurant starts singing happy birthday. So those are sort of our brand tenets and foundations for this project. And then we thought a lot about who our guests are. And they have a lot of really great attributes. They're family-oriented. They're open to new things. They're both locals and travelers. They're community-minded. They're invested in this community. They are design-forward. They're looking for new and interesting ideas. They're culinary appreciators. They want to eat good food. And they're movers and shakers. They live in Lake Oswego. They're attached to Lake Oswego. So those are our brand tenets. And this is kind of our foundational statement. We're calling our brand kind of proclamation, Light the Way. And that is really all about the fact that, as I said, the Pacific Northwest is dark 5 months out of the year. We seek sun. We seek rays of light and moments of golden glow. We venture to the highest mountain, up the cloud cover to ski or snowshoe with the sun on our faces. We hike miles into the forest to warm our bones in a natural hot springs. We light a fire not because it's cold, but because we crave the flicker and glow, which I think that last statement is like so true. And it's reflected in the design that you see so far. We've got fireplaces in a lot of rooms in the hotel. We're really focused on, the color of the hotel is light. It's white. It's meant to transport light. So that's really forming the foundation of how we're approaching the brand. And that's it for now. But you can get a sense for the thought we're putting into where we're headed with creating that brand, the name, the concept, the colors, the fonts, and all that will really flow from that. But I thought that was a really thoughtful exercise they went through to kind of get to the heart of Lake Oswego and kind of really define how they're thinking about this brand. So that's the brand. And then the restaurant flowed through a similar process. And in this case, they really, this is where they went out and interviewed and really thought about what does Lake Oswego need? Because really the foundational truth about this restaurant is it needs to be embraced by locals. 83 rooms is not going to support a 100-seat restaurant. We need locals to come back again and again to this restaurant. So it needs to be something they feel attached to, that they want, that they feel supportive of. So that really was what we thought about when we looked at this restaurant concept. So again, this is inside the new hotel, will be a 3-meal, 100-seat bar and restaurant. Outdoor seating, bar seating, a dining room, and a private dining room. We'll have takeout, room service, and catering. So it's a full-service restaurant. It has to do a lot. Our kind of creative concepts that we are focused on for the restaurant are, we want it to feel like a toast to Lake Oswego. It needs to feel like a place that people will come back to again and again. People want to come and have drinks with their friends. They want to have a birthday dinner for their parent. They want to take a business client out. And they want it to feel like a Lake Oswego destination, not a Portland, and there's been a lot of successful Portland restaurants that have come into Lake Oswego. This is not going to be that. This is going to be a Lake Oswego Foundation restaurant. So that's a little bit of a differentiator for us here. Again, this theme of escaping the gray. We want the colors to be light, feel light. We heard from people when we interviewed them that they felt like the concepts needed to be bright and light, especially if it's a 3-meal-a-day restaurant where if they're coming for brunch, it wants to feel filled with light. If they're coming at dinner, it needs to feel cozy. So we have to really think that through as we're thinking about the design. And then we want to celebrate the seasons. You know, we've got this wonderful farmers market, we've got great seasonal produce. We want to embrace that with all the folks in the landscape just beyond the borders of Lake Oswego. So we've really come up with a couple of precedent concepts that we like, and I'll just run you through these quickly. So these are inspirational, right? This is the kind of look and feel we're talking about. It's this concept of like an American brasserie is what we're really going for here. So we really love this one. This is a restaurant in Pacific Palisades in Los Angeles. You can see it's very bright, it's very warm, it's got great materiality, high ceilings, you know, unique colors, and it's fun, unfussy food. It's really approachable. The Josephine Estelle, this is a restaurant in New Orleans that we really like, and part of what was interesting to us about this one is how much they embraced a color palette. Feels really organic. Yeah, they embraced a color. It's green, you know, they're just owning that. And, you know, again, you see this theme of the banquettes. I think that's one that we just felt was gonna really do well here. A third one is this place in New York called Lafayette. You know, again, just great, approachable, understandable food, beautiful interiors that aren't fussy. You know, place you can come with all different types of, you know, constituents. And then finally, the Zuni Cafe is a standard that I think everyone thinks of when they think about the original California all-day, all-American restaurant. So these are our inspirations for some of the interiors and for the menu design as we get more into that. So that was the fun part, right? Yeah?
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Question?
I want this to be done now.
Me too.
It's fantastic. One little nugget that hopefully you've already kind of uncovered already is that people outside Lake Oswego coming in, businesses think Lake Oswego is uptight and professional and rich and this whole thing. And you've seen businesses and restaurants suffer immediately from assuming that, right?
Yeah.
So I think Domain Serene is a really good example. When they first got here, they thought everybody would roll in for happy hour in suit and ties, and then they had people come in flip-flops and swim trunks, right?
Yeah.
So that unpretentiousness is very Lake Oswego. And
Yeah.
so I think the concepts are spot on. I think the challenge will be to have it run in a way that kind of understands what Lake Oswego is and what it's
Yeah.
not. That's the only cautionary tale I would let you know.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right. All right, I warmed you up on all the fun stuff before we talk about money.
Do you have a time frame when you're?
Are you looking for a reservation?
Well, yeah, I just want to know when I should put mine in, but no, do you have a time frame when you'll know name of the hotel and the concept and whatever? Is that it?
Yeah, I think we'll know in the next probably 2 to 3 months, and I'm gonna talk with my operator about exactly how much they want to unveil now versus later, because there's some element of, you know, keeping some of that for later, but I think that we'll probably unveil the name certainly before construction starts.
All that I know is that after going to several weddings already this year, that, I mean, the demand is, I mean, it's just overwhelming.
Yeah.
And it's just, people are super excited. I mean, I keep talking to people and they go, is it going to be open at Christmas? No, we haven't, no, not quite yet, but to Aaron's point, it's the sooner the better.
Yeah. Well, we agree. So, oh, sorry, just quickly, kind of wanted to provide a little color on, you know, everyone's heard about what's happening in the capital markets right now with interest rates going up. You know, our industry, that's certainly a factor, and actually a bigger factor for us has just been construction cost escalation and unpredictability around supply chain, and, excuse me, just how the construction industry, excuse me, is kind of handling that. And so we've seen really large escalations across the board on our projects. And, you know, the tumultuous capital markets just means that the volume of real estate transactions has really dropped. Lenders and underwriters and investors are sort of in this waiting it out period right now. I've been talking to some of my broker friends, and they've just seen, transaction volume has basically dropped off the face of the cliff. We are seeing, very few large kind of stabilized properties are even trading right now. So there's just this sense right now of there's a lot of craziness, the markets are upside down, so we're sort of waiting to see what happens. And that's true for everything across the board, whether it's initiating a construction loan, finding an equity investor, or selling an asset. So it's just kind of all been a little bit in turmoil. There is a sense that things will settle down at some point and we'll settle into our new normal, but I think, we're facing another interest rate hike likely here very soon. I think most of the lenders and investors have already anticipated that as they've thought about their forward-looking underwriting, but it's still a time of great uncertainty. So we've just seen our construction loan interest rates increase by 1.5% to 2% across the board. And even though we're seeing rents go up, and I'm sure you've heard these stories that rents are increasing everywhere, not just in the Portland metro, but kind of across the country, and our average daily rates, the increase in the cost of money hasn't quite balanced out yet, right? So we're sort of in this challenging time. So what that means for this project is we've capitalized these projects sufficiently to get them to the point where we can put a shovel in the ground. And we are out looking for lenders, and we are looking for additional investment capital right now. Because of what's happened in the construction market and the challenges with costs, many of our lenders and investors who are interested in this project are saying, we like it, we're interested in it, come back to us when you have another set of numbers from your contractor, because we don't believe the numbers you have now, because they're old, or you've made changes. And that's just them hedging their bets, and it's understandable given how challenging it has been. So we are in the process right now of updating our budgets on both of these projects with input from the contractors and with the changes that Hacker has been making. So our expectation is that in the next month to 6 weeks, we will have all of our new numbers and be really in a full court press on finding investment. And it's a strange moment because I think everyone understands and believes, that Lake Oswego in particular, but residential and hotel continue to represent good investments, but the uncertainty in the capital markets just sort of means that people are hesitating. So we have a lot of confidence that this will go forward, but it has caused us to slow down a little bit. So that just leads into where we are with the schedule and give you a sense of what we think is going to happen coming down the pike. So if you recall, I was talking earlier, the multifamily is a little bit ahead of the hotel. We've always assumed we were going to stage the projects. It makes a lot of sense from a construction standpoint, and we'd like to see them go together because it makes a lot of sense. Saves us some money if we can build them together. It's efficient, but a lot of it depends on how the capital comes together. So for the multifamily, we're submitting our permit revision in early August. We'll be doing these construction pricing updates kind of right along with that. We have, again, in the fall, we're just really going to be focused on lender and investor outreach. And then the hope is that by December, we'll be in a position to purchase the land and start construction in early Q1 2023. I will say that is subject to financing, but that's the hope. And then the hotel schedule is not that different. As I mentioned before, we haven't completed our construction documentation, so you see the permit submittal anticipating to happen in November. So we'll be working through that this fall. And then right now the expectation for land purchase and starting construction is in Q1 of 2023. So not significantly far behind the residential, but probably a month to 2 months of lag. And again, the large caveat here is just capital formation. But again, confident, and we've done this before. It's not our first time at the rodeo, but it is a challenging environment right now. So it's a full court press from our team, and it's a top priority for us from a capital standpoint in the next quarter. So that's what I have for you today. And I'll leave it there. And if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
What estimate of a construction period has the contractor given on each of the projects?
16 to 18 months for each project? Yeah.
16 to 18?
16 to 18 months.
Looking at summer 2024, maybe fall 2024.
Okay, that's
Yes.
great.
So I'll get your reservation.
Yeah, hopefully summer 2024, but yes, yeah, it'll be from the time we start construction to the day we open the door for each project, I would expect probably 18 months.
Okay. Councilwoman?
So a couple things. One, I liked one of your little comments on the restaurant about it being quiet or not, or it was, the one thing about restaurants in Lake Oswego is if it's too noisy, people can't hear and then they don't come back.
Yeah.
I mean, because they can't. So I think you picked up on that very well. So I thought that was very good. What? Well, I'm just telling you how many people that demographically we have if you want the locals. It's not because they're old. I'm just
young
telling
and I
you.
agree completely.
You get it.
We've talked to our builder about the acoustics that we're going to put in the space, and it's definitely at the top of our minds.
Right, because most of those people have very high credit limits on their credit cards, and they eat out a lot, so you want those people. Well, that's the other part, is that.
Don't want to make them mad.
Yeah, true. They may want a hotel and everything here. In the big picture, with the housing costs elevated, will the prices to rent a place,
Are we increasing them?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, where are you from the target, from where you were to where you think you'll be? I mean, I know you've done some cost crunching, but there's also the upside. So I was just trying to figure out the affordability of if you've figured out pricing on what you think apartments will be, or.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. We're constantly surveying the market for, we need to demonstrate to our lenders and our investors that we are, in the target market range. So one of the unique things about Lake Oswego, as you know, is there's not a lot of new multifamily supply that's been built here in the last few years. There's two notable other projects besides us. The Mercado and the Windward are our two primary comparables. And so those are the two we pay a lot of attention to. And we're right in the running with those. Those are our primary comps, and we're really attaching our achievable rents to what they're achieving. And so that's our best way of expecting and underwriting the project. Do we think this is going to be a super special project? Of course, but we're and we don't want to get too bullish on the rents. We want to be conservative, but we're also realistically trying to be right in the market, in the middle of the market.
So you'll be around the same prices as Mercado and Windward, do you think?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then talking about the financing part, you guys came with a fair amount of capital to start with this project anyway, which was one of the very attractive parts of you being on this project. From the capital market standpoint, are you looking pretty much at private equity type funding, or are you doing banks, or is it all the above, or whoever has money? No.
We'll certainly have a bank as our debt partner, and they will take, probably on the residential, 60 to 65% of the total cost will be a lender. On the hotel, more like 50%. That's the way banks are underwriting hotel right now. So the remainder will be made up with private equity, and through our investment fund, we capitalize typically high net worth and individual investors. We are talking to potentially bringing in an institutional partner on this particular project because it meets their criteria. So that
and
could be
because the
something.
hotel is not a name brand, but it's a pretty big operator, right? Don't they have?
Yeah.
So do they have the capital to come up with the other 50%, or they?
They won't be a capital partner in the project.
They won't
They
be.
will be an operator.
Just an operator.
Right.
Okay.
But their name helps, and certainly their experience helps, and that's important for us as we go out and talk to investors, that they know we have an experienced operator with a good track record.
Okay, great, thank you.
Colleagues, any other questions? Thank you for coming with the update. I know it's
Absolutely.
information that
Our
we've
pleasure.
been eager to hear.
Okay.
We'll schedule an update.
I was going to suggest you ask them, when do you think would be a fair time when things would have changed enough in the project where an update will be different?
We could
Seems like
say-
it maybe
I
fall
can caucus
quarter.
with Sid, yeah, fall quarter.
Fall quarter.
Yep.
We'll stay in touch.
Oh, and one other thing, we brought it up earlier in the meeting. The Arts Council came and talked to us, and I don't know if you're going to work with them or if that's part of the scheme of conversations. I know it's private versus on public land, but even if you had some pads built into your models, even if you may not be providing the artwork or whatever, because you don't have to do the 1.5%, right? No, it's just public.
We're not required
lands.
to do that, but we
Right.
do, I do think we have 2, if not 3 pads already planned into the street to. Yeah, into the right-of-way.
Okay, great,
So,
because
yeah.
it'll just kind of complete that whole vision of, and
Yeah.
it may not happen tomorrow, but if once the Arts Council identifies areas, they're very good at coming up with money and figuring out things to help fund art projects, which people value highly in this town.
Absolutely.
And having the North Anchor, that'll be even better. So anyway, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you
Really
all.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is so exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Looks great.
Every time I see a new picture, I'm like, oh.
I know, they're fun. Take care.
Thank you. Okay, we just have some meeting minutes to approve from our April 5th meeting. Would someone like to move adoption of those minutes?
Move to approve the LORA meeting minutes as written.
Second?
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes 5-0. And then this is the consent agenda for board members only. This concurring with my appointments to the LORA Budget Committee, of course mirroring our City Budget Committee. So is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
Move to adopt the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes 4-0.
I'm closing my screen. We're done.
It's like, dude,
Okay.
all the things you could oppose.
Sorry.
And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Great job. That's great.